That's why we have to think as black people. Stop singing and dancing and start thinking.
Wow.
Thinking and reading. I say reading is more important than watching TV. And not getting addicted to looking at those small iPhone screens. See, where you were getting accustomed to looking there in a narrow space as opposed to paying attention broadly to what is happening around you.
It seems that in this age of the internet and video games, some students are finding it increasingly difficult to concentrate on reading and are arriving at university to do literature courses without having read very many of the classics. The Atlantic magazine reports that many professors have noticed this trend. Jonathan Bate is Foundation Professor of Environmental Humanities at Arizona State University and Professor of English at Oxford. He's been telling Justin Webb about his experiences as a teacher.
I've been teaching in British and American universities for 40 years. And when I began in Cambridge, you could say to students, this week it's Dickens. Please read Great Expectations, David Copperfield and Bleak House. Now, instead of 3 novels in a week, many students will struggle to get through 1 novel in 3 weeks.
Why?
Well, the currently fashionable answer is that it's to do with the attrition of attention span due to smartphones, 6-minute YouTube videos and instant TikTok dopamine hits. And I guess that is part of the story in the last few years. But of course, it really does all begin in schools, doesn't it? You only have to look at the thinning of the GCSE and A-level syllabuses and the tendency to prescribe works because they're shorter. I think of it as the John Steinbeck of mice and men effect. You know, they'd never prescribe the Grapes of Wrath anymore, but of mice and men is nice and short. I think there's one other factor, though, which is a kind of unintended consequence of the push in both elite British and American universities towards diversity and access. You know, the very desirable idea of getting in more students from disadvantaged backgrounds. But of course, those students come from disadvantaged schools where the teacher's main task is crowd control. And so the demands in terms of reading long books just are not there. It was interesting that one professor quoted in this article in The Atlantic speaks of an attainment gap between public and privately educated students. And I would have to say, when I was teaching at Oxford, that was my experience.
What, those who had been educated in the state system in Britain were less able to engage?
It's exactly, not less able to engage, very, very able students, but they simply hadn't been exposed to large numbers of long books, hadn't really developed, you know, that habit of concentrated, lengthy reading, which private schools in both the UK and the US still concentrate on. That said, I mean, I find it very interesting out here in the States. There is this phenomenon in a lot of charter schools. Charter schools are a bit like academy schools. They're state-funded, but free to set their own syllabus. And there's a big revival within these schools of so-called classical education. So my teenager has just graduated out of a high school called Great Hearts. And there they read the Iliad, the Odyssey, Dante's Inferno, Shakespeare, Crime and Punishment. They even read Nietzsche and Hegel. My son came back from school one day saying, we had bagels in class. And I said, why? And he said, the teacher said, you're going to have Hegel bagels because you've been reading Hegel and he's really difficult, so I'll reward you with bagels. Well, I couldn't understand Hegel when I was a graduate student. I'm amazed that 17-year-old American kids are reading Hegel. So there is some hope.
Yeah. And for those who aren't doing those things, the longer-term impact is what?
I think the longer-term impact is both very troubling for the future of a literary culture. If you haven't got readers, what are writers going to do? The intensive, thoughtful, quiet reading of great books is good for mental health. It's very, very good for developing skills of concentration and critical thinking. And if that falls away, that is problematic for businesses, for society, for individuals.
And for the sake of balance, I think there are a lot of people who would say, who've been to state schools, that actually they read many of the classics while they were there. That was Professor Jonathan Bate.
Did you say you saw someone steal a police horse this week?
I'll send you the video, Gus. I sent it to the firefighter. All-time classic. All-time. It might have topped when they pulled Reginald Barry out the car, Reginald Denny out the car. I mean, this was I'm going to send it to you. The brothers had his black power fist, and they're like, where did you get the police?
They stole a come on. I'm wounded.
From the police.
I'm wounded.
I'm going to send it to you.
I'm wounded. I'm totally wounded. That's
Chicago.
Gus, I just want to report that stealing the horse was a false report. The guy who was videotaped, he actually owned that horse, and he was falsely accused of stealing a police horse, and basically got his car spray painted saying, "Return the horse." Yeah. So that was a false report.
I can't do it.
Former President Donald Trump has for several days now spread lies and spouted conspiracy theories about the federal government's response to Hurricane Helene. Disinformation that's causing real-time confusion among some of those most desperate for help and answers. We're joined now by Juliette Kayyem, former Assistant Secretary at the Department of Homeland Security. Her latest piece in The Atlantic is titled, "The Fog of Disaster is Getting Worse." Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
As you note in the piece, the spread of rumors and misinformation has always been a problem during major disasters, especially when the usual channels of communication break down. But what's the real-world harm inflicted by lies and conspiracy theories about the hurricane relief effort?
Well, there's a couple of direct impacts. The first is how the government works and functions. It needs the support of communities and populations. If there's distrust, rumors, all sorts of rampant lies being spread, in particular by the former President Trump, it makes the work of government more difficult. The second is sort of the driving of resources. In normal disaster management, a lot of what the government finds out comes from local sources. A mayor, a local newspaper, a citizen saying, look, this is here, or we have a problem there. And they drive resources that way. If there's a lot of noise in the system, not just disinformation, someone gets something wrong, but actual misinformation, it actually impedes the ability to move resources. Finally, I've talked to people in FEMA, the concern or the animus towards the government that's being bred and spun up by so many right now is causing some of them to have to be deployed in pairs. So that just basically means that you're wasting resources on safety and security issues that don't normally exist in a crisis when people generally do come together.
Donald Trump's claims have focused on undermining confidence in the federal response and trying to tie that to his political opponent, Kamala Harris. So here's a sampling of some of the false things that he said in recent days.
Kamala spent all her FEMA money, billions of dollars, on housing for illegal migrants, many of whom should not be in our country. They're offering them $750 to people whose homes have been washed away. And yet we send tens of billions of dollars to foreign countries that most people have never heard of.
So here's the fact check. There is zero basis for claiming that FEMA disaster money is being diverted to undocumented immigrants. And the $750 he mentioned is merely the immediate upfront aid that survivors can get to cover basic supplies in the days after disaster hits. You mentioned that you know a lot of people at FEMA. There's this other false notion, this conspiracy theory that the federal government is trying to swoop in and buy up land from people. Tell me more about that and how it's resonating.
That's exactly right. So there's this, all of these rumors basically undermine trust. And that is so essential in a crisis. Trust not just in your government, but trust in your other citizens, that people will come together. And so all of these lies breed distrust amongst ethnic groups or racial groups or red states and blue states. That's been a rumor that's been a lie that Trump has been pushing, that resources aren't going to red states. One very harmful lie that is being spread is that the government, this is the opportunity for the government to take your house. Well, that is actually not true. FEMA cannot take your house. They can pay you and urge you to be bought out so that you don't build your home in the same place. It's a long process. It doesn't happen overnight. But you can imagine people worrying about, well, my home is going to be taken away. They believe these lies. And then what do? They don't evacuate. As we have a new hurricane, a deadly hurricane coming to Florida right now, the idea that people are going to stay put because of a lie that the government is going to take their home if they leave it is going to cost lives. And this is why, it's not just, these are, lies being spread around. They have direct impact on the life and health and safety of millions of people, either impacted by Helene or all of these hurricanes that are coming through now.
And as a sign of the times, FEMA now has part of its website devoted to dispelling rumors. What do you make of the federal government's efforts to combat misinformation and disinformation?
I mean, it's much better than it has been before. I think there used to be, you believe, well, no one's gonna actually believe this. We now know that these lies, they fill the vacuum that has been created by platforms like X that sort of contribute to the misinformation. Political leadership like Donald Trump that then amplify it. And then remember, a communications network, in particular in Helene, that's essentially down. It is hard for people to get online. It is hard for them to get those media resources that they used to have. So there's just all sorts of rumors at this stage. So FEMA has taken a step. I commend Republican governors and mayors that are pushing back against a narrative that is being asserted by Donald Trump as part of his election campaign. It's obscene at this stage, but we're just going to see more of it.
And lastly, Juliet, you write in your piece that emergency managers regularly urge people to stockpile 72 hours worth of food and water, but Americans should also be planning their disaster media diet with similar care. What does that look like, a disaster media diet?
This is where, no offense to us, national media matters less, that you want to follow local emergency managers, local media, radio, weather, people who are in the community and are telling you what to do. And then, of course, to listen to what is being asked of you. So if evacuations are not done casually, the kinds of evacuations we're seeing in Florida right now are serious. There's a lot of waiting going into them. But this is where people before the disaster, much like that they would retain 72 hours of water or food, really think about, well, how am I going to get my resources and my information in real time? And you can build for that now, even before the disaster.
Juliet Kayyem, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, everybody's like, jails ain't tough enough. Jails ain't tough enough. We got to have a death penalty. Jails ain't tough enough.
As many as 28,000 people incarcerated in Florida jails and prisons were in the mandatory evacuation zone for Hurricane Milton. But many officials refused to relocate the prisoners and insisted their facilities were safe. Meanwhile, an incarcerated person who was evacuated to a Florida maximum security prison shared their experience last night on social media. Quote, "Power's out in here, and the correctional officers are hiding in their offices while we're left in the dark. We're shouting for meds and updates, but no one's listening. Just trying to hold on and hope this storm doesn't swallow us whole," unquote. For more, we're joined by Jordan Martinez, an organizer with the Campaign to Fight Toxic Prisons and the group's Hurricane and Disaster Response Team. They helped organize pressure campaigns for officials to evacuate incarcerated people during this storm, as they have for many others. Welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. Jordan, explain what the situation has been now in Florida for prisoners.
Yeah, the ongoing situation, Amy, in Florida has been one of almost complete neglect and fiction writing by the Florida Department of Corrections and various county sheriff's offices, jails, etc., claiming that incarcerated people are in fact being evacuated. The Florida Department of Corrections claims 5,600 almost incarcerated people were evacuated, but in the list of facilities that they released, the vast majority of those evacuated were from work camps, halfway houses, work release centers, and in many cases, They were evacuated to quote-unquote hardened facilities literally across the street. For example, Lowell Work Camp, which is part of the Lowell Correctional Institution Women's Prison that organizers in Florida with Change Comes Now have been fighting around various conditions. Lowell Work Camp evacuated dozens of yards away to Lowell Correctional. And so we're seeing this fiction being raised by FDOC as well as the county sheriffs. We attempted to help force evacuations in multiple mandatory evacuation zones along the West Coast, and we were able to achieve one evacuation of the Orient Road Jail in Hillsborough County, but Manatee County, Lee County, Pinellas County, as well as St. Johns County on the eastern coast all left prisoners in mandatory evacuation zones in the jails.
And Jordan, you mentioned Pinellas County. The sheriff there stated that, quote, it's really not possible to evacuate the jail because of the number of inmates, and he instead moved people to higher floors. Can you talk about that?
I think this is, again, part of the fiction that the sheriffs and officials in Florida like to spin to project a sense of confidence in the face of conditions that are entirely unpredictable in hurricane situations. For the vast majority of hurricanes that we've organized around, the actually most dangerous portions of the hurricanes are not the immediate storm surges that might flood the first floor of a prison, jail, or detention center. It's actually the aftermath in the days and weeks following, in which water is cut off, access to food is cut off, power is cut off, medical supplies are cut off. And so evacuating people to higher floors when the bottom floor is completely destroyed that houses the majority of those facilities that keep the entire system running within the prison that people need to survive their basic living necessities. It can create conditions in which, as has been reported on Democracy Now! Before, people are forced to drink water from the toilet because they have no other access. And we see this again and again and again in disaster situations. And the fact that they are unable to evacuate people in mandatory evacuation zones, I think, goes to show the complete lack of prioritization of the lives of incarcerated people during hurricanes. And I think we can all agree, if we are prioritizing the safety of our communities, those communities must include the incarcerated people inside that are themselves organizing on the inside to fight for better conditions, and quite often being forced during hurricanes to prepare to protect their communities via forced slave labor with sandbags or in cleanup in the aftermath.
And Ginny, The Intercept reports prisoners in North Carolina were left in their cells without running water or power for nearly a week, cut off from communication with the outside world, and forced to keep their waste in plastic bags in their cells from Helene. Your final comments on what needs to be done?
I think the final comments on what needs to be done is there needs to be mandatory in-place rules and regulations during evacuations when a certain category of hurricane is coming in that require and force state and local county officials to have evacuation plans in preparation in advance. And lastly, I want to close with a quote from inside that we have with Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, who are the folks that reported those inside conditions, and we believe it's very important that incarcerated people are allowed to speak for themselves in these conditions. So this is coming out of the Florida Department of Corrections itself. Jailhouse Lawyers Speak says, "We urge the public to understand our plight as people in jails and prisons. We suffer during natural disasters in locked, dark cells, not knowing if we will survive or not. This is not just a logistical failure, it's a profound moral failing. While entire towns are evacuated and communities band together to seek safety, we remain locked within these walls, treated as less than human. It is heartbreaking to think that while the world prepares for survival during a pending natural disaster such as Hurricane Milton, we are still treated as if we don't matter, as if our lives can be tossed aside in the name of protocol. We must end this normalized routine. We beg the public to pay attention and have a heart of compassion."
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us, Jay, or Jordan Martinez, an organizer with the Campaign to Fight Toxic Prisons, the group's hurricane and disaster response team.
We're going to pause this for the benefit of all y'all who never saw soul food. Soul Food is a movie about a big, humongous black grandmother, aptly named Big Mama. Big Mama demonstrates her love by feeding herself and her offspring enormous amounts of pig lard. Then, get this, Big Mama's arteries are so clogged, they gotta amputate her arm.
It was her leg.
Right, okay, whatever, leg. Then, she dies of a heart attack. Or another stroke, or something.
God called her home.
And what does the family do after she dies? They get together for a Sunday dinner and eat the same food that just killed Big Mama. The same food! They didn't learn a lesson. Nobody went on a diet, and that's the end of the movie.
Now let's turn our attention to India. It's festival season here with Navratri, Durga Puja, Dashera, Diwali, all packed into 1 month. So there's music, dance, and best of all, there's food. So much food. But this time, we say watch what you eat. You don't have to compromise on the festivity. You just have to be making better choices. Because a new report is out. It says the foods that we love the most are hurting us the most. They're causing a diabetes crisis. India is often called the diabetes capital of the world. We account for 17% of the total cases worldwide. Do you know what that means in the world's most populous nation? It means more than 101 million Indians are living with diabetes, and 136 million Indians are pre-diabetic. They are at a high risk of developing the disease. That's what being pre-diabetic means. Now, let me put this in context. The total number of Indians struggling with diabetes is more than the entire population of Brazil. And the Indian Council of Medical Research, or ICMR, knows exactly why. ICMR is India's top body for medical research. Through a groundbreaking study, they have found the main culprit behind India's diabetes crisis. This is the first of its kind discovery, but it's not surprising at all. It's the food that we eat. More specifically, the real villain is the food that is high in AGE. That's an acronym. AGE stands for Advanced Glycogen End Products, AGE. The name itself is scary. Needless to say, it is a harmful compound. It forms when proteins and sugars combine, usually under high heat, like with food that is fried or roasted or grilled. And you know what falls in this category? Most junk food, especially the ones that are fried, like samosas, pakoras, French fries, chips, even baked products like cakes and sugary treats. This food is tasty, cheap, and easy to find. So no wonder that 38% Indians eat junk food regularly. Let me repeat that. 38% Indians eat junk food regularly. But this also explains why diabetes is no longer linked to aging. 93% children eat ultra-processed foods regularly. Among them, 53% eat these foods every day. So diabetes is becoming increasingly common among children, which is scary. In diabetes, the body starts resisting insulin. That's a hormone. It turns food into energy. So when cells do not respond to insulin, glucose cannot be stored in the body. It has nowhere to go. It keeps circulating. It leads to high blood sugar levels. And an array of problems follow. It can cause numbness, heart attacks, strokes, blindness. Living with diabetes means round-the-clock monitoring, keeping sugar levels in check, taking insulin injections, and dealing with the constant threat of complications. The situation is quite bad. But India is not the isolated case here. Globally, junk food consumption is increasing, and so is diabetes. 529 million people live with the disease. And by 2050, this number will double. The worst hit countries are India, China, Pakistan, Indonesia, and the U.S. And what is the solution? We can keep our own diet in check. That's the bare minimum. It will help. But that's like trying to stop climate change just by recycling paper. We also need to crack down on the big culprits, the fossil fuel companies, in this case, the junk food moguls. We need policy action. Junk food will be, and listen to this carefully, junk food will be a $535 billion industry in India next year. How is this okay? India has been labeled the diabetes capital of the world. We know that it is linked to junk food, and yet we are fueling a processed food boom. It is foolish and deadly.
A terrible thing to waste. Environmental racism and its assault on the American mind. Written by Harriet A. Washington.
Newsflash, Cheetos and M&Ms are not health foods. California says they actually could be toxic for children. Last week, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill that will remove snacks like those, snacks that have synthetic food dyes in them, from public schools. The 6 dyes targeted give snack foods their unnaturally vibrant colors. So think about those bright colors in Skittles, for example. So that means beginning December 2027, snacks will need a new recipe if they want to remain on school campuses here in California. We're going to talk about what the research says about these dyes' effects on kids with Asa Bradman, chair of the Department of Public Health at UC Merced, and part of the research team that studied the potential effects of synthetic food dyes on children's behavior. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us about these particular food dyes. We're talking about food dyes called blue 1 and 2, green 3, red 40, yellow 5 and 6. Are they in a lot of the candy and snack foods that we eat as Americans and that kids eat?
Yes. These colors are often found in especially highly refined and highly processed foods, which separately we're learning, from many other sources of information is very unhealthy. Mm-hmm. For example, when we talk about candies and treats and stuff like that, when you are eating foods with these dyes, you're eating many refined carbohydrates, other synthetic ingredients, artificial ingredients that more and more are being associated with things like child obesity, adolescent obesity, and other health concerns.
So you were able to pull out the dyes from these foods and positively link those dyes to behavior like ADHD in children.
Yes. I want to be clear that we didn't do the studies, but this was a literature review of the studies that have been published examining these exposures and outcomes. Many of these were based on placebo-controlled and blind studies. So this is a situation like you might do for a pharmaceutical, where one subject, in this case a child, is given a drink or something that contains the dyes. Another week they might be given the drink without the dyes, and they don't necessarily know what they're consuming. And then parent, a teacher, a technician in the study then will report observations on behavior without knowing what the child had been exposed to. And in many of those studies, we see a relationship between consumption of the food dyes and changes in behavior.
Okay, and specifically, what changes in behavior?
Hyperactivity, difficulty settling down, often the behaviors that we use when we talk about ADHD, so attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There's been an explosion of these kinds of behavioral challenges in kids. And there's a lot of evidence that some environmental exposures, in this case, we're talking about food dyes, but other chemicals, like lead and other chemicals, have been associated with behavior changes. We're talking about behavior that's beyond what would be the normal excitement and activity of a young child or a child, but kind of puts them over the edge in some cases into a category that would perhaps make it more difficult for them to thrive. One thing I want to emphasize here too is that this ban, it's a ban for selling these foods with these dyes in schools. It doesn't ban them. We're not telling parents or kids what they can eat. The bill does not take candy away from kids. But I think importantly what it does is it directs schools to not sanction foods that we know are contributing to diet-related illness in our young population. Also, when we think about these food dyes, it's important to consider, short-term and long-term exposures. Having a pink ice cream cone at a birthday party or a cupcake is, a lot different, say, than drinking a juice beverage every day that contains these food dyes. So, the occasional exposure versus chronic exposure is really important.
Right.
And I think we're saying as an education institution, there's kind of a larger picture here when we think about what kind of foods we want to promote in our schools.
When you looked at the research and all of these studies on the connection between these food dyes and hyperactivity or ADHD, symptoms of ADHD, were these found in all kids or kids who may be more susceptible, who maybe already have symptoms of ADHD, or is it pretty much blanket that some kids will, no matter what, if they have ADHD or not, would be affected by these dyes?
I think when you look at the literature, it's hard to answer that exactly, but there is some evidence that kids that already have problems may be more vulnerable, and that some kids may be more affected by it. But I think importantly, there's a need for more research to better understand what the impacts of these exposures are. Another aspect of this too is that in many cases, there's alternatives to these particular synthetic food dyes. In places like Whole Foods, I think Trader Joe's, they sell many colorful products that don't contain these artificial food colors. And I think it's important to realize that, we can achieve the kind of festive appearances of treats and foods and avoid and minimize the use of these synthetic dyes.
Right. Turmeric, for example, is bright yellow and, as I can attest, has stained my kitchen countertop because it is so powerful. And also, I guess, beetroot, that's also used in a lot of food as a coloring, right?
Exactly.
So Halloween is right around the corner. What do you think parents listening to this should take away from our conversation? Should the kids not be able to eat their little mini packs of Skittles, or is it okay?
Well, I would never recommend taking candy from kids. I think that's a parent decision. But, this particular law is focused on what do we want to sanction in our schools and what kind of foods do we want our schools to promote. And as an education institution trying to educate and promote wellness in our children and families, I agree that they should not be providing foods that have these materials. In the home, I think it's important to talk about frequency, chronic versus episodic intake. If you're eating candy after Halloween and enjoying it, I think you should enjoy it. At the same time, I think parents should be aware. And, there's a lot of talk about the sugar high that comes from candy. I wonder if sometimes it may be coming from other ingredients in the candies. And then, I hope that over time we can either set standards that are perhaps more protective for these dyes, or again, there's alternatives out there. We might be able to have the, festive and delightful looking candy that we often enjoy. I mean, I remember going with my kids into a frozen yogurt place, and when you look at the array of colored toppings, it's fun. But I think if we can find alternatives to many of these synthetic materials, we'll be better off.
All good information. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, it's my pleasure.
That's Asa Bradman, co-founder of the Center for Environmental Research and Children's Health and chair of the Department of Public Health at UC Merced.
Man, this shit worse than cancer, like a fucking disease. Living a nightmare, they telling this dream. Look what they did to Martin Luther, bullet holes in our kings. And they wonder why we never believe. And they wonder why we never will leave. Nigga, we poor. Young niggas warn about that corner store, but the chinks on that. And you claiming that's your block, who you think on that? Quicksand in the hood and we gon' sink on that. You should think on that. Poison water out in Flint, they let them little babies drink on that. They don't care about us.
President Biden announced new restrictions on lead in drinking water today.
There's no safe level of lead exposure, period. None. The only way forward is to replace every lead pipeline and connect the American people to clean water.
The president spoke in Wisconsin, a state with more than 300,000 lead pipes in its water system. Under the new landmark rule from the Environmental Protection Agency, Wisconsin will need to replace them all within the next 10 years. NPR's Ping Huang has more.
There are some 9 million homes around the country getting water through lead pipes. Michael Regan, head of the EPA, says those pipes have the potential to leach toxic metal into drinking water.
In children, lead can severely harm mental and physical development, slow down learning, and irreversibly damage the brain. In adults, lead can cause increased blood pressure, heart disease, decreased kidney function, and cancer.
Congress banned lead pipes for drinking water in 1986, but pipes that were previously installed were allowed to remain until now. The new rule is called the Lead and Copper Rule Improvement and is expected to significantly reduce the incidence of low birth weight and heart disease and improve IQ in affected neighborhoods. Betsy Sutherland used to work in the Office of Water at EPA, and she says the agency was up against a deadline.
They had to really kill themselves to get this final so that they would beat the October 16th effective date of the Trump rule.
Today's EPA rule supersedes a rule by the Trump administration that advocates say didn't go far enough. Eric Olson, with the environmental advocacy group NRDC, says he's very happy with this version.
Once this rule is fully in effect and all the lead pipes are pulled out in the next decade, it's going to really have big benefits for our health.
Olson says it has significant funding. The bipartisan infrastructure law included at least $15 billion for lead pipe removal. The rule also lowers the lead action level from 15 to 10 parts per billion. Water systems that exceed that repeatedly have to give customers filters to use at home. Environmental advocates say there are still gaps. It doesn't require schools or childcare centers to test their water for lead, and it doesn't require water systems to pay for lead pipe replacement on private property. The EPA says such actions could exceed their authorities. The first step to replacing lead pipes is knowing where they are, and water systems are expected to submit their initial inventories next week. Ping Huang, NPR News.
Now, I said when I saw that CVS going up in flames, I said, now that senior citizens home is right next to it. I said that to people the minute that it was happening. I said, now the reason that CVS there in the first place is because of the senior citizens home. Because that's where they have to get their medicine. I say, now all this means that you burn it down, little Junior is going to have to walk 16 blocks to get grandmother her heart medicine. And if she lays up there and dies because she couldn't get it, now what?
America's biggest pharmacy chains are not healthy. CVS and Walgreens are closing hundreds of stores and rethinking their role in our lives. NPR's Alina Selyuk explains why.
Pick a city, any city in America, and you'll probably find a corner just like this one in Washington, D.C., with a Starbucks, a sandwich shop, and a CVS, or a Walgreens, or sometimes both.
There are very, very, very few spots in the U.S. where you have to drive more than 5 miles to get to a pharmacy.
Brian Tankilit at the investment bank Jefferies sums up the first and the simplest part of why big pharmacies have languished. There are so many. They've gobbled up mom-and-pop shops, signed long leases for prime real estate, and now Walgreens says a quarter of its stores don't make money. And if you can't grow by adding stores, you have to grow the business inside the stores.
The bigger problem is that the stores that they have are not very good.
That's Neil Saunders with the analytics firm Global Data, delivering the bitter pill. That's the second problem.
Their kind of very blunt response is to close stores. They do need to close some stores, but they also need to focus on making the stores they do have work better operationally.
This problem is chronic. Walk with me through a CVS, and you quickly see it's understaffed while trying to be two things at once.
Getting to the prescription counter, which is arguably the heart of this operation, means first walking through a convenience store with snacks and laundry detergent. Most of that is locked up to prevent theft.
All these shelves were meant to boost profits, except sales here have sagged for years, in a losing battle with Amazon, Walmart, grocery stores, dollar stores. So one big idea is for pharmacies to ditch the store and focus on the pharmacy.
Please remember to take your receipt.
But here lies the third and most complicated problem. The pharmacy business has been getting less and less profitable. There have been constant changes to how CVS and Walgreens get paid for filling prescriptions. And it has to do with a big shift years back in the balance of power between pharmacies and insurers.
Historically, there was a view that there was a lot of customer loyalty to their specific retail pharmacy.
Brian Tankilit.
And that patients or consumers would be all up in arms if they were forced to move their prescriptions.
This idea was put to a test about a decade ago when Walgreens got into a public fight with a company called Express Scripts. It's one of the middlemen that helps insurers negotiate drug prices. They're called pharmacy benefit managers. Walgreens and Express Scripts played a game of chicken over how much Walgreens should earn from prescriptions. And Walgreens lost. Millions of people simply had to go elsewhere for their medicine.
That proved that patient loyalty is not to the retail pharmacy, but it actually is whatever my insurance is willing to pay.
Beyond these three big problems, there are plenty more. A poor online presence, various government fines. The pharmacy chains have attempted to change. CVS actually bought one of those middlemen called Caremark, and the insurance company Aetna. Both CVS and Walgreens added primary care clinics, a project that could be revolutionary but takes tremendous time and money. Here's Saunders.
out of the two of them, there's no doubt that Walgreens is in real trouble, whereas CVS is just in a difficult spot.
Walgreens has now shaken up leadership. CVS is reportedly considering a breakup to undo its mergers with Caremark and Aetna. Both chains are also proposing new ways to negotiate drug prices, hoping that's the big shot in the arm that they need. Alina Seluch, NPR News.
Thank you for shopping at CVS.
Black babies cost less.
There's been a decline in the number of licensed foster homes across the U.S. For example, in the past 5 years, Nevada lost 40% of its licensed foster homes. South Carolina lost 60%. And of available foster homes, few are willing or able to take in kids with complex behavioral and mental health challenges. In Ohio, the state says a pilot program it's running may be the start of a solution. The Ohio Newsroom's Erin Gottsacker reports.
Samantha Stewart has always wanted a big family, so over the past few years, the door to her home has been rotating. She and her husband have fostered 7 kids. Right now, 2 of them are playing in the living room, doing somersaults and singing songs from Frozen.
Where'd he go? Where'd he go?
One of them, a 5-year-old, faces challenges a lot of kids her age don't.
Our daughter with autism, she had gotten kicked out of a couple different daycares because of her behaviors that stem from her autism and neglect.
Stewart is a nurse, so she's had professional experience working with kids with autism and was eager to work with them personally, too, as a foster parent.
And I knew that I would be able to give them the resources that they needed to succeed in life with my nursing background. I knew what kind of therapies they would need.
So she signed up for a novel program, a treatment foster care partnership, where she learned about trauma-informed care and how to respond to tricky behaviors. Now she's one of 10 treatment foster homes in her area licensed to care for kids with high behavior needs. There are a lot of kids in need of care like this, says Rachel Mackey with the National Association of Counties. She recently compiled a report on county priorities for the child welfare system and found that in nearly every state of the country, there aren't enough foster families to care for all the kids that need help. And it's an even bigger challenge for county agencies to find foster care for kids with mental illnesses, intellectual disabilities, and histories of juvenile delinquency.
The continuum just doesn't support a lot of these youth at this moment in time. And that's why we have, kids sleeping in hotels or in social workers' offices or overstaying at the ER.
Melanie Allen, the director of the Department of Job and Family Services in Northwest Ohio's Sandusky County, is familiar with this struggle. She says it's gotten more intense since the pandemic.
The problem we were having was we couldn't get a regular foster home to take a high acuity 10-year-old. So we were placing kids younger and younger in congregate care.
That's a problem for a few reasons, she says. For one, group homes aren't always the best setting for 10-year-olds to grow up in. Plus, they're really expensive. Ellen knows of one child in particular that stayed in a group home at a cost of nearly $500 a day. When she moved to a foster home, the cost dropped to just $50 a day. On top of that, group homes can be hours from a child's biological parents, making it hard for them to visit. But if a child can stay in a local treatment foster home, parents can not only visit, they can learn how to manage their child's challenging behaviors by working alongside foster parents.
We want them to be able to transfer skills. We want them to be able to talk about, this is how I've managed this behavior.
But finding and training treatment foster parents isn't easy, especially for a small department like Allen's. So they partnered with neighboring counties to hire a shared social worker solely dedicated to the task. They've trained 10 treatment foster homes across a 5-county area so far. Another 5 families are in the process of being licensed. And now the state has dedicated $2 million to replicate this model across Ohio. It's another step in the effort to find foster families and treatment for children with disabilities and mental illnesses who need a home. For NPR News, I'm Erin Gottsacker in Upper Sandusky, Ohio.
The man knot, race, class, genre, and the dilemmas of black manhood.
Over the weekend, folks from the St. Louis region gathered in Midtown St. Louis for an event called Unmask. Organized by the Village Path, the third annual Unmask was an evening dedicated to self-identified men sharing about the ways masculinity shows up in how they live, how they relate to others, and how they heal. But that kind of sharing and community should not be limited to yearly events. And our guests today can attest to that truth, both in their professional and personal lives, when it comes to Black men who are more vulnerable to mental health challenges than men of other racial groups. Joining us to talk about barriers and benefits to supporting Black men's mental health, we welcome Fred Williams, psychotherapist for Mental Alchemy Counseling. Fred, welcome to the show.
Hi, Elaine. Thanks for having me.
And we also have joining us Bryant Antoine, co-founder of The Village Path and licensed behavioral analyst. Bryant, you've been on the show before. Welcome back to you.
Thank you.
So in the introduction, I'd mentioned Black men's comparative vulnerability to mental health challenges, and that stems from systemic social and cultural issues that are deeply enmeshed with one another. Now, Fred, what are one or two very common symptoms of mental health challenges that you see in Black men that maybe don't show up in the same way in non-Black men?
Well, I think one of the biggest symptoms I see is just not being able to communicate our feelings, not knowing how, growing up, not feeling safe enough to be vulnerable with anyone, or taking the chance on being vulnerable with someone and it backfires. But also a system where when you are truthful and open up about things, it can backfire against you. Mm-hmm. It could be something where these spaces haven't always been meant for us, and so it can be tough for us to open up about those, about our feelings and challenges.
And when you say backfire, are there some things that you have learned from those you've worked with over time? Of course, maintaining anonymity, but things, situations wherein that backfiring has happened?
Well, we're more likely to be put on medication where it may not need to be the first option. Or it's like, here, take this for the rest of your life, and we're going to numb it with that instead of addressing the root cause or finding you a counselor that you feel safe enough with to be vulnerable.
And so this path of, medication and maybe other ways that people are seeking to take care of these underlying issues, what are the ways that people do try to take care of themselves and not do so very successfully?
Oh, those are the two big ones, marijuana and alcohol, I would say. I see the most in my practice. So instead of addressing it and feeling those feelings, that uncomfortableness of whatever it is you want to get out and bring to the surface, and whenever it comes up, you just numb it down. Just numb it with alcohol and marijuana.
How is it that those challenges, Fred, are unique to Black men, or at least more prevalent? Some might say what you're talking about is common to everyone. What is it about Black men and the culture maybe they're growing up in, or some of the things we talked about as far as the systemic issues that just make these more acute among Black males?
Yeah, well, we may not have easy access to healthcare or a mental professional, but we can find a liquor store on almost every corner. Or in our culture, every rap song you see, there's liquor in it. There's marijuana in it. So what we see is what we're using.
As far as your personal journey goes, you were not someone who became a psychotherapist as your first profession. There were some things that came before that, right?
Yeah, so when I graduated from the University of Illinois in 2006, and I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I was a speech communication and political science major, and I decided I didn't want to do that, and I followed some friends into sales. And so for roughly, 11 years, I had several different sales jobs that were high pressure, high stress, lots of travel. It felt like I had lots of bosses. My customers and clients were my bosses, and I was trying to please a lot of people, and I didn't handle that stress and pressure very well. So instead of seeking therapy, meditation, yoga, going to the gym, I would just push it back with alcohol and avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally reached out, well, my primary care physician recommended that I see a therapist. And the first experience wasn't the best experience.
How so?
Well, the first therapist I saw was a white woman. It was nothing against her. It's just we didn't click. And that's a common thing when looking for a therapist. A person may go seek a therapist and it doesn't work out, and so like I'm throwing therapy out the window. It's crap. It doesn't work.
Right.
But I suggest keep looking until you find that fit. And the second therapist I found, his name was Ed, and he was a black man, and he heard me. It's not necessarily a skin color thing. It's a cultural thing. He was easily able to put himself in my shoes without knowing me. He had a big idea of what my life had been like, some of the struggles I'd been like. He knew what it's like to be black in this world.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the overwhelming majority of people who are working in mental health as professionals, the majority are white.
Mm-hmm.
As of 2015, only 4% of American psychologists or therapists were black. So how important is it to have a therapist who can culturally relate to a client? And how does gender specifically come into this, Fred?
Well, representation matters. I told you about my experience with a black male therapist. However, right now, my therapist is a black woman. But some men may not be at that place where they're ready to speak to even a black woman. So, again, representation matters tremendously, just from a cultural aspect, to be able to feel comfortable and secure in those spaces.
Yeah.
And sometimes having a person that looks like you and can relate to what you've been through matters a lot.
Mm-hmm. Bryant, have you found the same in working with those who come through the Village Path, or maybe yourself with the past experiences you have had? Is that cultural competency plus the gender, being able to relate on the lines of gender, something that's important?
Definitely. I think, like Fred said, like representation matters. There's a component of therapy where, like, you can't like filter yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like as a client, you should be able to like freely express yourself, right? And sometimes even if we don't mean to, right, when we're in a space with someone who doesn't really look like us, sometimes we filter ourselves, you know? I could say that myself. Like there's some topics of course, had white therapists myself, and there's just certain things like I don't feel comfortable talking to them about, you know? And it shouldn't be that way. Like it should be an open book, you know, and you should be able to have an open book in order to kind of like break down some of the core issues, right, that you have. And so yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely makes a big difference.
Yeah. Bryant Antoine is co-founder of The Village Path and a licensed behavioral analyst, and Fred Williams is psychotherapist for Mental Alchemy Counseling. Fred and Bryant, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
The Turner Diaries. It sold over 500,000 copies. Who do you think is buying it? Eric Rudolph, the Olympic bomber, Wade Page, who shut up the Sikh temple, Larry Ford, developing typhoid and cholera, William Carr with the cyanide bomb, anthrax, ricin, botulism, C4, IEDs. I could go on like this for hours, and all of them are white supremacists.
The Department of Justice on Tuesday charged an Afghan national with conspiring to carry out a terror attack on Election Day. In a statement, Attorney General Merrick Garland says, quote, the Justice Department foiled the defendant's plot to acquire semi-automatic weapons and commit a violent attack in the name of ISIS. CBS News Justice Department reporter Rob Legary joins us now. So what do we know, Rob, about the suspect and these charges?
Hey, good afternoon, John, or good evening, John. Thanks for having me. So the criminal complaint was just filed in federal court in Oklahoma, and we're just reading over this 28-page criminal complaint. And what we're learning is that Tawhidi was an Afghan national who was led into the United States in 2021 on a special immigrant visa. And prosecutors allege that he and a co-conspirator, who they describe as his wife's brother, so his brother-in-law, were a subscriber to ISIS ideology and consumed ISIS propaganda. They allege that the defendant and his co-conspirator, who's not named in charging documents, sought to carry out an election day attack here in the U.S. in the name of ISIS by doing many things: purchasing weapons, selling their family home, working to repatriate their family back to other countries across the world to make sure that they weren't in the United States. And I just want to read a portion here from the criminal complaint. He further stated that he and his co-conspirator sought to obtain weapons and purchased AK-47 rifles for the purpose of conducting firearms training and committing an attack on Election Day, targeting large gatherings of people. So prosecutors arrested him yesterday, and they said following his arrest, he basically explained the plan of his attack. Prosecutors, the Justice Department said today that he made his first appearance in federal court and will likely remain in custody. John.
Rob, do we have any sense, I know it's quite early in this, but do we have any sense whether this was a lone wolf operation or whether there's any larger connection, anything in the filing that suggests anything other than these two participants?
Sure. So what we do know is that there were some communications on Telegram with other individuals named here. They are not charged, but there was some communication here. What we do know is that the defendant and his co-conspirator, who appeared to be his brother-in-law, were consuming ISIS ideology and professing their commitment to that cause.
And finally, does it seem like this was far down the lane or that they were in the preliminary sort of planning stages? I mean, on the one hand, it sounds like they were making efforts to get people out of town and do that kind of thing, which seems like they were pretty far down the operation. On the other hand, they were just getting the weapons. What do we know about where they were in terms of the timeline?
Right. Well, the FBI director came out with a statement saying that his agents were able to come and stop this attack before anybody was hurt. We're about a month out, less than a month out from Election Day. And so this is a serious threat that the FBI and the Justice Department clearly take seriously. We have statements from the FBI director and the Attorney General announcing this arrest. And we do know that federal officials and state officials have been on guard for certain threats from abroad over the last few months. The FBI director has said in recent months that he has never seen this many red lights flashing on the threat environment as he has seen in the last few months. And so this is clearly something that federal officials have been watching for. What we don't know really is, to your point, how far along in their planning were they? They clearly were seeking to obtain weapons, seeking to sell their house, but federal investigators reveal that the person they were trying to sell their house to was a confidential human source with the FBI. The person they were allegedly trying to buy their weapons from was an undercover agent. And so how far along? Well, we'll probably see in the next few weeks and months as the court proceedings carry on.
Rob Aguirre with all the details. Thank you very much.
I turned the ISO up on my camera, and I have this dark photo of this flag waving, and smoke tear gas is coming down, and there's hardly any more people up the top. It just was weirdly over. You know, I walked 2 blocks, called an Uber. I just remember looking at who my driver was going to be, and I was so relieved that this driver was a black man. Because I really, honestly couldn't deal with any more white folks that day. I couldn't. I was just over it.
Political violence researchers are not expecting a repeat of the January 6, 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol. Instead, many say election-related violence is more likely to happen in local communities. Civil society organizations have quietly begun preparing. NPR domestic extremism correspondent Odette Youssef reports.
In February, Rachel Kleinfeld invited about 100 political violence researchers onto a call. She asked them first to talk about what they know.
Every single number is elevated, from
hate crimes, political homicides, people driving into protesters, you name it, if it's a kind of political violence, it's been going up since 2015.
Kleinfeld is a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She says the group then turned to what could happen around the election. The period she worries about the most is the one that begins after the polls close, especially if it takes long to tally the votes.
There are a small number of counties within states that are counting late. For instance, Pennsylvania can't start counting absentee ballots till the day of the election. And if we again get more Democrats voting by absentee, you could have it going like it's going red and then moving blue. That's the kind of nightmare scenario, but very likely.
The concern is that a scenario like this creates a window for narratives to circulate about vote tampering or other nefarious play. And that could raise the risk of armed mobilizations. But in the last 3 years, civil society organizations have been ramping up efforts to defuse these situations well before they get to that point.
If you do work ahead of time that depolarizes and do work with influencers where they are able to get clear information from trusted sources early enough, then you are able to in-group influence.
Nealon Parker heads one of those organizations. It's called Common Ground USA. When Parker talks about influencers, she's not talking about the social media kind. Her group has focused on swing states, working with real-life influencers, respected leaders from the faith, business, and elected communities. The goal is to shore up what they call local resiliency. That is, giving those influencers early warning and support when outsiders are targeting their community with disinformation and division to create a crisis, kind of like what happened in Springfield, Ohio, where false claims about Haitians inflamed divisions and led to bomb threats.
If you can immediately get people to respond and say, your spaghetti's not sticking, like this is not going to work here and this is not going to work now, that's what you're looking to build. And a lot of that is behind the scenes work.
It's also difficult work, especially when the spaces that used to promote community dialogue have been targeted in the so-called culture wars.
And that's, I think, why you see authoritarian movements go after libraries, you see them go after schools, you see them go after the YMCA.
Jill Garvey is co-director of a nonprofit called States at the Core, or STAC, which helps communities resist authoritarianism.
Because once they sort of shut those places down or make them scary or places where people don't want to engage, you see a lot more polarization happening.
NPR spoke with more than a dozen researchers, nonprofit, and foundation leaders who are engaged in this work. All of them see the lights flashing red during this election period. Many worry that dwelling on the scary stuff could make people feel powerless. But Nealon Parker says everyday people can and should see their agency in correcting course.
Most of the interactions that most people in this country will have over the next month are not with radicalized people. They are with people where you can walk away from the precipice, and you should engage in those conversations to do that.
Odette Youssef, NPR News.
Little brother, I heard y'all ain't hitting in New York. Word. I heard y'all ain't hitting in L.A. Word, word. I heard y'all ain't hitting in North Carolina. North Carolina.
Last night, former President Barack Obama delivered a blunt message to black men.
Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that.
Polls indicate that former President Donald Trump may be making inroads with some male black voters, and others may not vote. That is a problem for Vice President Harris's campaign, and something that NPR's senior White House correspondent Tamara Keith found this week in North Carolina.
Sharita Evans goes by Storm the Barber. She works at a shop called Head Changers in the community of Rocky Mount, North Carolina. It's a swing state where Democrats need to improve black voter turnout if Harris is going to have a chance of winning. Evans is going to vote for Harris, but she knows people who aren't planning to.
Most of my female family and friends, they're voting for Harris.
But I have a lot of males who just male friends and families like, I don't know if I'm gonna vote for it. And I think because I think they're not, a lot of men aren't ready to vote for a woman.
Harris is not talking about this, but Evans thinks she should because it's a real issue.
In my community, you have a lot of men who, won't even be under a female leadership in church.
I first met Evans back in May, and she was less than enthusiastic about the election.
Yeah, I don't like Trump, and I don't really like Biden.
But the thing that I remember most from that conversation was what she said about Harris.
But after she became vice president, it seemed like she just kind of got quiet.
From what Evans could see, Harris made history and then just kind of disappeared. So I wanted to know what Evans thinks about the election now that Harris is her party's nominee.
I think she's a better candidate than Biden.
For Evans, Harris has the same thing going for her that Biden did. She's not Donald Trump.
I'm be honest with you. I don't really like Trump, so I'm gonna vote for her. But I don't think she's done a very great job of addressing the main issues that we are having.
That gas prices are high and groceries are too expensive.
You're not addressing that. And I don't think price gouging is completely it.
In her ads that show up constantly on the TV and the barbershop, Harris talks about going after companies for price gouging. But Evans doesn't buy that as a real solution. Back in May, Evans was cutting the hair of a 22-year-old college student named Christian Pounds. At the time, he didn't like either candidate and didn't think his vote would change anything. Reached on the phone this week, he says he's definitely planning to vote.
When Biden dropped out, I was kind of happy.
The other night, he says he got into it with his uncle and his cousin about voting.
It got very heated because I think my cousin was basically on the stance of how I was before. And my uncle was like, you better vote for Kamala Harris.
His cousin wasn't planning to vote, and his uncle wanted none of it. Pound says he sees a real generational divide.
It's more so the young people versus the old when it comes to voting versus not voting.
In the neighboring community of Wilson, Mike Harris is a barber at Style Masters. He's been voting for Democrats all his life. In May, he said he was voting for Biden. Now he's voting for Harris and hopes she will become the first female president. I ask him whether any of his clients are planning to vote for Trump.
I have some people, I don't know if they're joking or not, say they are. Some people don't believe in female leaders, but I tell them all the time, my mom raised being my brother in our house, so I think that, women can do the job.
The Harris campaign says it is working hard to reach black men and win them over. To that end, next week, Harris is going to Detroit for a town hall with influential black radio host Charlemagne the God. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
The most impotent creature in the form of a person on this planet is a black male. Period. No matter where on the planet they are. The most powerless person is a black male. The most powerless person on the planet in the form of a person is a black male person.
Barack Obama is back on the campaign trail and he's making the case against Donald Trump. But before his guest feature in Pennsylvania, Obama made a surprise visit to Kamala Harris's campaign headquarters in Pittsburgh. It was there that he got candid, maybe a little too candid if you are in the vice president's inner circle tonight. He warned that Harris is underperforming him with black voters, and he had a message specifically for black men.
Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for them. So now you're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because That's what being a man is? Putting women down? That's not acceptable.
CNN political commentator Errol Lewis is in our fifth seat for this conversation. Errol, I guess he knew the cameras were there. It was an unscheduled stop, but that message was so pointed. In addition to him making it very clear, Kamala Harris is not doing what she needs to do with this core Democratic constituency.
That's right. Although he is asking her, let's be clear, to go over a very high hurdle. Barack Obama got historic levels of black voter registration and turnout and support, and he did it twice. It was almost inevitable that it was going to swing more toward the long-term average of a handful of black voters.
Can I interrupt you for just a moment, just to show you something here? Because we went back, looked at 2020 exit polls. Biden got 92% of the black vote. Right now, according to Quinnipiac, this is in Pennsylvania, according to Quinnipiac, Harris is at 78. It's a big gap in this state right now. And that can be closed because Biden is not Barack Obama.
Biden is not, well, he was Barack Obama's running mate. Certainly some spillover there. But you cannot ask of every black candidate in the post-Obama era, you've got to come up with 92% of the black vote every time. That is just not a reasonable assumption. If the margins are as tight as they're likely to be in this race, that's going to cause you problems in Pittsburgh and in Philadelphia and in Detroit and in Milwaukee and in Atlanta and in all of the swing states. And so they're going to have to come up with a strategy. Now, Barack Obama is trying one strategy, trying to sort of connect with some of the black male voters who they think have been drifting away and are likely to drift away in these last 26 days. I'm not sure that's the right message, but they have to try something.
It's a lot of pressure. I mean, this is not a nice message. This is a very stern message.
Let me ask you a question, Abby and Nina. Let me say, I find it very interesting that we're trying to reach out to white men. We're trying to reach out to black men. The people whose rights are really on the ballot right now are women. And we're begging all these men to pay attention to us and to care enough about this election, to vote, to come out, to support us. I feel like Barack going on the campaign trail right now makes perfect sense. Of course, right? He's a top surrogate for Democrats. He should be out there doing the work right now. I think it's so amazing to me that with women's rights on the line, we're spending so much time focusing on making sure men care.
Because men, I don't know, it's because men are the problem right now for Kamala Harris.
I mean, women.
And by the way, Governor Walz, according to Politico, is going to be going out on a men tour, literally a tour of media to appeal to men.
They need to appeal to the needs of the voters. And so when I was a delegate for President Obama in both of his elections in Ohio, right now the vice president is down 11 points in Ohio, even though I fully expect President Trump to take Ohio, as he did twice, but to be down 11 points compared to President Biden, that is a problem. But this other issue I want to bring up is a problem, too. Why are black men being lectured to? Why are black men being belittled in ways that no other voting group? Now, a lot of love for former President Obama, but for him to single out black men is wrong. And some of the black men that I have talked to have their reasons why they want to vote a different way. And even if some of us may not like that, we have to respect it. So unless President Barack Obama is going to go out and lecture every other group of men from other identity groups, my message for Democrats is don't bring it here to black men who, by and large, don't vote much differently from black women. And what, as a politician, we should be trying to get all voters to vote. And hopefully there are a few good men out there who do care about the stripping away of some of women's bodily autonomy. But this is wrong for President Obama. It is a wrong course for the Harris-Walz campaign to lay at the feet of black men when they have their reasons. In 2020, the vice president was labeled a cop, as we know.
But do you think, sorry to interrupt you, Nina, but do you think he's right? That one of the reasons is because they don't like the idea of a woman?
It might be some listen, black men are socialized in the same society as any other any other man. So yes, is misogyny maybe a part of it? But again, is President Obama and is the Harris Waltz campaign going to lecture other male groups in the same way that they're lecturing
This is
black
not just
men?
about.
I don't think so.
It's not just about Pennsylvania. It's not just about men. It sounds like there's a concern that there's a broad problem for Vice President Harris with the blue wall. It's basically, according to the poll of polls, no clear leader, a tied race essentially in all three of these battleground states. You know, I don't know that this is because Trump has run a great campaign, but I mean,
I don't think it's that.
I mean, maybe he has, maybe he hasn't, but he has struggled against Kamala Harris in this early stage, but he's still kept this race pretty tight and maybe has made some inroads in the last couple of weeks.
Oh, absolutely he has. Vice President Harris's high watermark was about a week and a half after the convention. It's slowly been trickling down. That Quinnipiac poll showing the vice president down in Michigan and Wisconsin sent alarm bells throughout every Democrat office in the country. But I want to say this, the blue wall is cracking, and black men are just one part of a broader puzzle that she hasn't been able to reach. Now, to her credit, she hasn't been running for very long. This campaign's new. This is a new experiment of replacing somebody late in the cycle. So, okay, we'll give her that. However, she's struggling with union voters. The two of the biggest unions ever didn't endorse her. She's struggling with Muslim Americans in Michigan, according to CARE's own numbers. She's struggling with Hispanics in California. She's not expected to remake the Obama coalition. That's impossible. That's a 1 in a million, especially given the short time frame. But she has a lot of bigger problems, and that's why you see Tammy Baldwin panicking about being down more.
Here's Debbie Dingle. People need to see the real Kamala Harris. This is what she told Axios. They need to let her get in the union halls and just talk to people. Whatever you think about Trump, he's personable.
Well, I think that's one of the things. I mean, he obviously, from 2016 all the way through 2020, now through 2024, he comes off as a fighter. He comes off as a fighter for whatever issue matters to you. I think that's one of his big appeals. One of the challenges, I think, for the vice president's campaign is that I don't think Barack Obama is the right surrogate to go out there and do it. No, now, he's beloved by Democrats. He's beloved generally by Americans, but he's never had coattails. Aside from 2008, when he first got elected, Democrats lost more than 1,000 seats in state and federal offices during his 8 years. He was the sitting president when Donald Trump won Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, with Barack Obama campaigning in Michigan and in Pennsylvania, and it didn't change the narrative. So I just don't know if he has the coattails. He'll fire up the base, but is he going to get anybody new to come out and vote?
You know, the other mistake that they're making is focusing too much on personality. I mean, Kamala Harris has got an appealing personality, and we're all getting to know her. But this is the incumbent party. She was part of an administration. They have a decent record to run on. You could say to black men, for example, $7 billion for historically black colleges and universities. You know, we've done certain things. We've had an economy where we've had not one, not two, but over 36 record highs in the stock market this year. If you've got a retirement account, that is helping you. You can go out and explain these things.
Black male privilege. We get the black male. We're supposed to have the black male privilege shuffle. We do the Halloween, or we do the election edition of the black male shuffle. Black male privilege shuffle. Oh, Beezers. Context of white supremacy. Privileged. I'm extra privileged black male, Gus T. Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information with non-white people, victims of white supremacy, on what the local, national, global system of racism, what it is, how it works, what it means to be classified as white. Today's date, Saturday, October 12, 2024. So I have been told. This is our weekly compensatory call-in. If you have thoughts, counter-racist suggestions, questions, privileged, black male, misogynistic, sexist, patriarchal, feeling queasy about the prospects of a woman president, perish the thought. Although she's been vice president for 4 years, I mean, that had to be at least a little bit revolting, right? If you're patriarchal, sexist, black male, as we are. But if you have thoughts, let us know. The number 605-313-5164. The code 564943 #. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 #. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I want to make sure we include one more privileged, misogynistic, patriarchal black male who will not be voting for Kamala Harris next month. Denorriss Richardson. They didn't have audio. He was so privileged. That was a part of the black male privilege. They say when us privileged black dudes, when we get massacred, choked down, stomped out, anally sodomized, that it gets lots of attention and such. Well, privileged Denorriss Richardson, they didn't even get a local segment that I was able to locate. Now, if it is out there, I just neglected or failed to find it. Shame on Gus T. But I did search repeatedly throughout the week. Normally I locate. I did not, at least not audio. News report, black man. I should have got Obama. I should have let him read it. Black man found hanged after lawsuit against police. This is from October 9. In recent months, the tragic and suspicious deaths of privileged black males across the United States have raised serious concerns about systemic issues within law enforcement and the justice system. One such case that has garnered attention is that of Denorriss Richardson, a 39-year-old man found dead under questionable circumstances in Colbert County, Alabama. His story highlights the ongoing struggles faced by black males in their pursuit of justice and accountability. Richardson was discovered hanging from a rope inside a carport on the 28th of September. The location was unfamiliar to him, raising immediate questions about the nature of the death. The Alabama Department of Forensic Science ruled the cause of death as suicide, a conclusion that has been met with skepticism by his family, particularly his estranged wife, Leigh Ann Richardson. Leigh Ann revealed that her husband had been embroiled in a legal battle against the Sheffield, Alabama Police Department, alleging police brutality. According to her, Richardson was a victim of systemic harassment throughout his life. He had previously filed a lawsuit claiming he was subjected to excessive force, including being beaten, tased, and restrained for hours while being denied medical assistance. Everything but being sodomized, right? In his lawsuit, he detailed a harrowing experience after a January 9, 2024 arrest where he attempted to call 911 for medical help but was forcibly removed from the phone. Leigh Ann believes that this arrest was an intimidation tactic aimed at pressuring Richardson to withdraw his lawsuit. Despite the claims of suicide, Leigh Ann and Richardson's mother, Bonita Richardson, have expressed disbelief in the narrative presented by authorities. Bonita described her son as a joyful person who had no history of mental health issues, stating that he would never kill himself. Adding to the family's distress, they reported that Richardson was misidentified as a white male in various police reports despite being a black man. Now, that's even wacky because they have, in quotes, white male, and then in the report he's referred to as a black man. And all of the images that I've seen of Mr. Richardson, this ain't no Obama. He maybe could pass racially. None of that. This is a super melanated black dude. This misrepresentation raises further questions about the integrity of the investigation and the treatment of black individuals within the justice system, so-called. In light of their doubts regarding the official autopsy findings, the Richardson family has ordered a second autopsy to seek clarity on Richardson's death. They are determined to uncover the truth and hold those responsible accountable. This case is part of a larger pattern of suspicious deaths involving, black men, which have often been dismissed or inadequately investigated. The Richardson family's plight underscores the urgent need for systemic reform within law enforcement and the judicial system to ensure that all individuals, regardless of racial classification, receive F-word, correct should be, just treatment. I'll stop there. I also thought it was important. This report has the word system in it frequently. The system is not the system of justice. It is the system of white supremacy. That's the system that we're dealing with, period. But I thought this case, and even importantly, some of the other reports that I've seen on this case, and they are limited. The reports that I've seen, the place, the residence where they found, carport, where they found Mr. Richardson's body, this is an abandoned house. Now, you heard in this report, they said this property was unfamiliar to Mr. Richardson. It was an abandoned lot or an abandoned house. Why would he pick an abandoned house to go and I'm going to hang myself? Now, certainly we talked about mental health issues before, but that was with Javion McGee in North Carolina. That's a different case entirely. Totally different case, suspicious, still being investigated. We'll see what happens there. I didn't see any reports with that case, Mr. McGee in North Carolina, where he had been saying, I feel threatened, my life is in danger, I've been making allegations about police misconduct, and they are out to get me. I don't remember anything like that. Now, if I've missed that information, let me know. But the fact that immediately they're saying that he had been saying that he was in danger, that there was going to be some sort of police retaliation, which I've heard this sort of thing before. You are going to you upset John Burge, terrorist in Chicago. You upset John Burge or Daniel Holtzclaw, who's in Oklahoma. One of the Mark Furman in L.A. Ooh. Might O.J. Simpson you. You never know. I have heard that sort of thing before, but if that is valid, if he had been voicing these sort of threats before and then this happened, oh man, we start with a lot more suspicion on this one than the JV, or at least me personally, just because of that fact. This person had already been saying there is a danger here, I'm fearful for my life, and then this happens. Yeah, it's going to take a whole lot to convince me otherwise with this case. And they didn't even have a whole lot to say about this one in Alabama, of all places. Keep news out, share. Denorriss Richardson, share. Privileged black male who will not be voting for Kamala Harris. Maybe he was misogynistic too, so good riddance, patriarch. Let's see. Before we get to tidbits that we heard, listeners, frequently we have over 2,000 programs, perhaps more to come, white people permitting. We'll ask Gus T, how do you locate such and such broadcast from 2013 or 2010 or wherever in the archives? One of the easy ways. C.O.W.S is archived on a number of platforms: Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Podchaser, and YouTube. Just goes on and on and on. Podchaser specifically. I link to their site all the time for podcast hosting. They have a search option. You'll see the menu bar when you click on the page for the cows specifically at Podchaser. They have a menu bar at the top of the page. Once you click on the little episodes, you'll see it has 2,000 plus episodes. Click on that. There is a menu bar at the top of the list of episodes. You can use the little search bar. You can search whatever you comes to mind. You could put in Fuller, anti-sex, Fanon, because we did read Frantz Fanon. Food, because we've had tons of programs talking about nutrition and plant-based diet and getting away from high fructose corn syrup, whatever. It could be whatever sort of keywords you can think of or subject. Use it, and the episodes where that term is used will pop up. It's accurate. I use it myself from time to time if I forget, the exact year or month when a program aired. Apple Podcasts, they do not have a search bar, but they have recently updated how the podcasts present. So for platforms like mine, where they have thousands literally of episodes, now you can easily just grab the search bar, not the search bar, but you can easily just kind of scroll through the page or through the episodes much easier. It used to be a real chore, and you'd have to load and all this, and it's much more seamless. Like, you can just kind of go through the whole thousands pretty quickly, all the way back, and just kind of pick out like, oh, I didn't see that. Or if you're looking for the book club, you can see it all and listen in correct chronological order, all the rest of it. But again, Podchaser, they have a search bar at the top of the episodes page for the cows. Feel free, search if you're looking for specific content in our archives, anywhere from 2009 all the way up to right now. It does work efficiently. Listener-supported counter-racist radio for all of those 15 plus years. Invest if you think the cows is constructive. Hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button, you'll see it, top right corner, and then beneath the PayPal button, you'll see the links for PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. Cash App address, cash.app/$the cows. Huge thanks to all of the investors who have kept us on the air for 15 plus, hopefully 15 plus constructive years, not wasting time and energy when we could have been listening to anything else. You can also hit the Amazon wish list listed under Gus T. Renegade. Much obliged for all of the folks who have nabbed an item or 10 over the years. Again, hopefully we have been worthy of your time and energy. We do not have infinite time to waste on anyone, so hopefully, this content is pushing us closer towards replacing white supremacy with justice immediately. Sense of urgency about all this. Now, to the content that we heard, that section on reading at the beginning I found fascinating. Now, in one part from the BBC, they were talking about how students, when they get to college, secondary school, they've not read the classics, end quote. Now, at one point, I didn't know if it seemed like that was the problem, that they've not read Moby Dick, Dr. Welsing had, that they've not read Great Expectations, that they've not read Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky, they've not read Man in the High Castle, we did. Is that, like, at one point it almost sounded like that was the problem? But then as they continued, it was like, oh, okay, it's that they are not reading longer books, where they said it used to be that you could give a student 3 novels and they'd be done in a week. Now you give them a novel and they would struggle to be done 1 novel, and they would struggle to finish in 3 weeks. Wow. I mean, they went through, what's the reason for this and blah, blah, blah. Now, interestingly, they said now, and this different part of the world, they're talking the UK. Now, they said students who are at the lesser schools, they don't get access to this material. They don't read these sort of books. It's not that they can't do it, but they don't get access to this sort of material. So when they get to college, they haven't read it, and it's a tussle for them to read. Now, my suspicion, you got lots of white students who are at these high schools and ritzy private schools, wherever. They are not reading Crime and Punishment and C.O.W.S when they are 13, 15, 17. I seen Varsity Blues. We read Special Admissions. You got a lot of cheating there, too. Whether they go get the audiobook or whatever. So, I don't know. Either way, when they were talking about access, that was one. It's like, I guess I'd have to think on that. But certainly you're going to get different access to resources and teachers depending on the type of school that you're in. But when they talked about what is the difference that shows up in terms of your reading comprehension and maybe even cognitive abilities, they said, well, when you're reading these longer books, greater attention span, concentration, even connecting ideas and themes over a long period of time. I even had to pause for a second, like, whoa, Cal's book club, Catherine Massey book club, wow, maybe we're contributing, correcting that, doing some longer books we have to stick in and read and remember what we've read in the first chapter and connect that throughout the rest of the text. Like, oh, okay, wow, I certainly know people don't read, but people don't read longer books even. I think I had heard that before, where people were doing more like short stories and that sort of thing. Like, wow, okay, that's interesting. Even how that shows up in life, where they said where your reading comprehension, cognitive abilities, wow. Definitely want to encourage then, make sure you are not just reading, but reading some longer material for younger folks. Don't just want them reading poems and something you're going to be done, short story, which not bashing short stories, right? Especially for younger people. I read a lot of short stories and such. Children do read fiction. But just saying, maybe making sure longer biographies, Malcolm X, classic, right? Dr. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Get some of those longer books that we have read in the Catherine Massey Book Club and read. Develop that concentration. To solve the problem of racism, white supremacy, we will need better concentration. The science of counter-racism requires concentration. The next segment, and I would even add, listening to audiobooks does not develop the same skills as reading the actual book. I know it's not the same. They even have studies. I read one recently where they have done studies. It's not the same. Not even close. Next, they had the report on ultra-processed foods and the dangers. Now, they were talking about India. I was a little flummoxed because they were rattling through all the current holidays that are happening in that part of the world currently. And I was like, what, wait a minute, what? I couldn't even, it's like, I'm so ignorant. You're talking fast. Like, I might want to investigate, like, what festival, what kind of food? Because they have a lot of vegetarian and vegan food in India. That, like, I can pull up and get me a plate full. Like, slow down, man. I might want to investigate or get free tickets. I can go over there and hang out for a week or two, and I already have in mind what I want to eat. Anyway, that would be important. Oh, man, we eat a lot of bad food. fried foods and potato chips, and which is fascinating because that is not what I think of when I think of Indian food. I think of curry, like fresh, like spicy, fresh vegetables, turmeric. That's what I think of when I think of Indian food, not fried potato chips and all the rest. Now, I do know they have, not everything is, and they even talked about, because they have a lot of poor people. Hey, we did read Cased Isabel Wilkerson, 8 thumbs down. Ugh. But she does talk about so-called caste in India, so the dark people, the Dalits and the dark non-white people in India, I guess they don't get to eat curry and all that. They get the worst food and all the rest of it, and the worst jobs and the worst life expectancy and all the rest of it. But man, they talked about how, I think they said like it was over 30% of the population, that's the ultra processed fried and greasy chips and all the rest of it. That's what they eat all the time. Like, wow, that is, whoa, that is quite comparable to the U.S., if it's not worse over here. I know we got to be around to say it's nothing. We would not be anything to brag on over here, eating Cheetos and McDonald's all day long. But wow, that is devastating. Now, poverty is a big part of that too, because she said it repeatedly. It's cheap, fried, put all that salt and sugar on it. It's cheap, easy to produce. Same thing that they say in this part of the world, especially if you don't have a fresh grocery store anywhere around. They had the report where they were talking about getting the chemicals in the foods out of the schools, away from the children. I'm so pleased. Brag on the Catherine Massey Book Club. We stand by our work, proudly stand by our work. Over 12 years, we've read about this in the book club repeatedly. This was in A Terrible Thing to Waste. This was in Shauna Swan's Countdown. Even though it wasn't in the book club, we had Judith Finlayson as a guest on the program. We talked about her book, You Are What Your Grandparents Ate. All of these different texts talk about this in detail, about this food and why you should not be yellow number 5. In fact, we talked about this on the cows even earlier with Dr. Lathan and other guests. We talked about all of this. Mbweze Ashanti, way back in 2011, we talked about this because he talked about how he had all those cavities and things. Now, even when they got to the part about the Halloween candy, because they said that's coming up, and hey, man, I want me a Tootsie Pop and I got to get me 15 Snickers bars. Like, what would you say, man? Man, that stuff is addictive. No, man, you do not need to take no break. Well, that's about, and particularly, that is one of the worst decisions you can make for children. Do you know why? That is going to be in. Do you remember? And when I say encoded, what you mean, Brother Gus? That sound metaphor. What do you mean? But that's going to be one of those special moments that that child remembers for the rest of their life. That's going to be locked in their brain computer that night. Me and attempted mommy, me and attempted daddy, and we would eat, oh my God. I had a peach smoothie today. Put Snickers to shame. Woo! And I mean for reals. I used to be one, I eat 13 Snickers, as many as I can get. Halloween coming up, I would wait until the day afterwards. I'm going to eat 15, 20, as many as I can get. As many as I can get. Because it's what he just, it's Halloween. We got the, 31st. You let that child do that, and that becomes a habit that they repeat for the rest of their life. Halloween, we used to go, and that time I was 11 and got my costume together. I was going to be Joker, and got to eat 50 Snickers bars. So now every Halloween I expect to eat 50 Snickers bars until I'm 55 or 65. I get to live that long before the diabetes set in. I eat 50 Snicker bars for Halloween. And if we're going to do it for that holiday, hey, they do make special Snicker bars for Christmas. They do make special Snicker bars for Thanksgiving. They do make special Snicker bars for Easter. I mean, they might not get you with all of them, but they make a lot of. Hey, man, I was on the Tubby Club, man. I can tell you, they make a lot of specialty Snicker bars that would give you a rip. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's almost like Halloween. I mean, I'm going to get me some of these Memorial Day Snicker bars. Yeah. It is never a good idea. What they call it, junk food, man. And it's addictive. Man, with crack cocaine, you could take one hit from the crack pipe. Yes, you could take the one hit. Maybe you won't die. Maybe you won't get addicted. Maybe you won't lose all your teeth. Maybe you won't be out soliciting fellatio to support your habit, male or female. Maybe that's true. But, I mean, hey, do we really want to take the chance? Maybe you eat one Snicker bar and tomorrow we right back on that peach smoothie. We switch it up and get that grapefruit smoothie, get that sweet potato pie smoothie, and we just keep right on rolling. We never even think of Snicker bar again. Maybe there are a lot of tubby people who clearly, what they say, you can't just eat one Lay's potato chip. You can't just eat one bag of Cheetos. They even got the deals and say, you can't just eat one Whopper. You got to get 2 of them, 3 of them, 8 of them. Nah, man, Halloween is, you can make healthy candy. You can buy, hey, man, one coon did say you don't have to celebrate no holidays. The great Dr. Kanban called it a horror day. You could just keep your teeth and say, look at all the cavities. The dentists, whoo, and most of them white, race soldiers, they finna come in. And then you can get that part from I Know Why That Caged Bird Sings. The great Dr. Maya Angelou couldn't even go to the dentist. They had to sneak her to the veterinarian to get her tooth removed. How much you want that candy bar now? How much you want that Snicker bar now? PSA, take care of your floss. There we go. We're not doing Snicker bars and floss your teeth. How about that? Race soldiers would lose their mind. They're not getting Tootsie Rolls and lollipops and Kit Kats and Butterfingers. They're flossing their teeth. Ugh. We're going to have to get on it. Burn the midnight oil, as Fuller say, because we got to get on that job. They're getting closer to justice. Floss your teeth. Put that Snicker bar down. Don't model that for your children. That is like the worst. The worst. If you are addicted to candy, man, try to hide that from your children. Don't be consuming Snicker bars and Haagen-Dazs and cotton candy and all that foolishness in front of your children. Oh, you are what your grandparents ate. Even white people don't care about children. That was just one state. That wasn't no federal effort to get all these toxic foods out of the school. Why is this there to begin with? They've been talking about tubby children for a long time, right? Then they look at me, even you all will look at me like, saying white people don't care. What else can I say? Next, let's see. Oh, whoa. When they talked about the food, and children, they said people who are more vulnerable are more susceptible to these poisonous food. That was so important. That's another one where they didn't say nothing about racism. They didn't say nothing about niggers, but who would be more vulnerable? And then, to compensate, you don't get an organic peach smoothie. You just get a Snicker bar, and probably off-brand Snicker bar from the dollar store. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. I'm bragging on my peach smoothie. I have to tell, when she said I have turmeric that has stained my counter, me too. That can be really hard to remove. Now, that would be one. Now, how many of you all have fresh turmeric, like the root? That would be one. Most of the places that I lived before I got to Atlanta. Once I got to Atlanta, a little bit easier, but woof, if you just live around black people normally, wow, you might have to travel to where the white people live to get fresh ginger. In Seattle, it's plentiful. It's all, and organic. It will stain your countertop. Yes, especially if you have a white countertop or a white cutting board, it will stain all of that. The beets that they mentioned, yes, it will stain fresh beets. They will stain your countertop or cutting board, wood or other color, especially if it's a lighter color. But both of those foods that she mentioned that stain our countertops, both of those are on the super food list. White people don't have that in the schools, to my knowledge. You do not. I don't even think if you had asked me at any time while I was in school, if you had presented me with fresh turmeric and said, do you know what this is? Like, I would have put Chris Rock to shame. You know, he has that where you said, black people don't know nothing about black history, which is true. But he said, fat people, they know everything about food. Not true, because I was tubby. You come to me and say, man, come on, Gus T, you all tubby, you know about food. Now, what is this? Like, no idea. No idea. It was once I stopped eating the ultra-processed foods, then turmeric. Oh, and this is a superfood. Then you put the Snicker bar down. Oh, okay. Eat the turmeric every day. Gotcha. I have fresh turmeric. I should have, and I even thought I should have put that in my smoothie because it's right there with the cup. Next time. Beets. I love them. I have fresh beets right now. I was even going to say that food is. I ate so well this week. I thought that today when I had my peach smoothie, we heard all those reports about food. I ate so well this week, which I generally eat pretty well as a plant-based eater. Been the case for years now. I had my peach smoothie. I had pumpkin pie smoothie. I had lemon smoothie. The best was the peach smoothie by far, but I would make all of those. And in fact, I've already made that pumpkin pie smoothie several times. Very good. So I had, those are all smoothies. I had vegan sushi on 3 different days, which, man, that normally lifts my quality of life index like at least 0.25%. I am a very happy camper when I get vegan sushi. 3 different days I got vegan sushi. What else did I eat that was orange chicken, but I made it with orange cauliflower. Magnificent. So I have to catch up the slow people. So I made, like the Chinese dish, orange chicken. Instead of making it with chicken, I made it with the color orange cauliflower. I thought that, at least to me, I thought that was so funny. I remember as I was transitioning to eating more veggies, I remember seeing purple cauliflower and orange cauliflower, much like turmeric. I had no idea that cauliflower came in more than one color. I think just seeing the whites, it's like, what? Purple? That is crazy. That was another one where I was like, I wonder what you do with purple cauliflower. Now, give it here, like lots of, give me the orange cauliflower to make orange chicken, even though you could use white cauliflower. You really could have even done the purple and, whatever. Anyway, that was magnificent. That was the first time I made it. Just wow. I don't think you could fool people that it was chicken, but it was so good. The sauce was even amazing, organic. Try to avoid those chemicals, pesticides as best you can. Race soldiers toxify the entire universe. So, I mean, you just try to do the best you can. And they lie a lot, too. So you just try to do the best you can. But I do not normally consume fruit juice, period. I consume smoothies. The only, I think, non-water beverage I consume that's not a smoothie is tea and coconut water. That's it. Drink more water. Drink more water. But I don't drink fruit juice because a lot of times it's sugar and they add a lot of, sometimes they even put those dyes and chemicals that they were trying to get out of the schools in the fruit juices and such as well. So drink more water, drink more water. The recipe for the orange, I think orange chicken traditionally, it does have orange in it. You would get, I mean, now they probably, put some old fake whatever in it, but traditionally when you make the sauce, they would take fresh orange, which is what I was going to do. This recipe, it called for a substantial amount, enough that you'd had to have like 4 or 5 oranges to do so, which I would have been happy to do. I love having oranges and all the rest of it, but they had fresh, cold-pressed, organic OJ. I could have got the oranges. I get the cold-pressed OJ, and it was magnificent. I said I had to say something about it, and I had turmeric rice with about an inch of fresh turmeric, fresh ginger. Pictures posted online. You can see it. Magnificent. With brown rice even. Magnificent. And the fresh turmeric is what gives the rice the color it has. You'll see in the picture. Anyway, but wow, being able to eat quality food, and it was when I was making the vegan sushi, I was watching a video for the recipe for the spicy tuna roll, making that with jackfruit, which was pretty good. And I didn't even like the spicy tuna roll when I did eat fish and I did eat tuna, but I did like the jackfruit version. When I was watching the video, the Japanese chef said that Japanese dishes, many of them do require a lot of time to prepare, which is often the case for sushi. But, and she added quickly, she said, in Japan, we consider all meals important. Full stop. And she went on about making the sushi happily. I said, wow. What meals do we consider important in this part of the world? Thanksgiving? Last meal if you're on death row? I had a tough time. I was thinking, like, they say it's cliche, like breakfast is the most important meal, but I mean, you can tell that's a cliche because a lot of people eat Pop-Tarts for breakfast or nothing at all or a donut. So, I mean, that's obviously, like whatever. I mean, that in practice, that is not the mentality in this part of the world that I've seen, that I grew up with at all. That, hey, I know it's going to take quite a bit of time to make these sushi rolls, but every meal is important. Now, they are victims of white supremacy, and sushi or no, white people did drop bombs on them and bragged about it. So sushi does not solve the world's problems. But I do think there's something to be said. Every meal is important. That is a part of counter-racism. Even if, it's really difficult. If I lived somewhere where I couldn't make peach smoothies, oh, well, I would not be eating McDonald's just because I couldn't make peach smoothies. I'd go look at my pictures. Oh, I didn't even get to take a picture. I have to make another one, take a picture. But I would just go look at the pictures of when I did have peach smoothies, and then I would compensate and eat whatever I could. But I would not be eating McDonald's and Snicker bars just because I couldn't get peaches anymore. Let's see. They talked about the replacing lead pipes, Freddie Gray, Newark. We go on a long list of all that. We'll see, how white people, how quickly they do all of that. Listener said, make sure do not drink the pipe water. Get great filters. Seeing all that with the hurricane. Get water stored and then get filters and such. Still need to be able to take a shower. Still need to be able to flush the toilet. Lots of uses for water. So try to get good filters, especially if you're in a residence. Get great filters and get water stored in case it gets shut off and all that, and you're in your residence and all the rest of it. But getting rid of the lead pipes, allegedly, over the next 10 years. We heard the important report about therapists for black males specifically. I thought that was important. I know Dr. Welsing certainly would encourage therapy, although, man, in a system of white supremacy, it's not designed for non-white people to get therapy at all. And they said 4% of the psychologists are classified as black. Now, they didn't even break it down to say, now, how many of that is black dudes? We'll assume it's rough. I mean, regardless, even if it is 2 and 2, man, that is, you might have a tough time finding a Dr. Leroy or Dr. Lakeisha, and then hopeful that you got one of them who, oh yes, racism, that is a problem. Tell me more about it, black brother. It might, and deliberately so, it might be kind of difficult for you to get access to that sort of therapeutic help. Well, let's see. When they had the report about the political violence that's supposed to be coming up at the end of the year, and they were saying that they didn't think it was going to be a repetition of January 6th, although that's laughable, they said they spoke with the political violence researchers. I said, wow, who is in this organization? Do we have anybody who's a member? Did they send you an invitation to join? I would love to see like a photo of everybody who is a member of the political violence researchers. And they said, oh no, we think it's more likely to be something on a local level. Where, really? Who is going to be terroristic on a local level if Kamala Harris wins? Or if Trump wins? You think it's going to be those no-count Leroy, Jamal, shiftless black males, misogynistic, mad, Kamala Harris wins? You think they'll be out cutting a fool in Atlanta? We'll have to see. They were talking about the males. Governor Walz, that's VP Harris's running mate. For VP, Walz talking about. He was out on a hunting trip today. What in the great equalizer? He had on the whole hunting outfit and everything. They were mocking him online, saying he was dressed like Elmer Fudd. And then he had erectile dysfunction. Seemed like he didn't even know how to operate the shotgun. They mocked him about that too. 4 more years. DT. And then we got to blame. Why is it going to be 4 more years of DT? No count. Shiftless Leroy. Denorriss Richardson. Because he's not voting for Kamala Harris either. It's Dennoriss, shiftless. Not getting out here and supporting your black sister. I was so appalled about that for so many reasons. And even concentration. I think this is the only time where I've heard President Obama, I was like, oh my God, if I was into some name calling, ooh, Obeezy, you tried me. You really tried me this week, man. I don't give nothing about your running mate, lame candidate if she wins or lose or nothing like that. You going to put this on us? You going to put this on? Oh. and they got to say you're going to we misogynist. Oh. I took some breaths, Dr. Welsing, 10 stops. And even beyond all that, I said, wait a minute now, weren't they doing death threats to Obeezy? Oh, that's right, they were. I said, sometimes it seems like if you are selected to be president, you might not be in the office anymore, but, you still got duties. I don't know if they could have rolled old Jimmy Carter out. Centenarian, right? Doing the J. Strom Thurmond, hang around for a long time. I don't think they could have wheeled old Jimmy Carter out and had him lecture Negro males about being shiftless and patriarchal. I don't think they could have wheeled Governor Gavin Newsom out, finger wag at black males. Like, I don't think Kamala Harris could have come out and said that, like, Obeezy is probably about the only one. Maybe James Clyburn, congressman down in South Carolina. Maybe. But, they had a hard time getting somebody else to come out and say that sort of thing. Like, y'all got to get behind our sister. Get out of here. And I will add, I pointed this out exactly before. Election time, there is a unique black misandry. They will come out. They don't do this for anybody else. And finger wag. I could not imagine them coming out. Anybody else. Latino males, Latino females. I even have seen reports where they've talked to so-called Indians, say, how you feel about your sister Kamala? Meh. They ain't gonna go finger wagging. You got to get behind your sister. Nobody but privileged black males. I could not imagine. Can you think of a time where they've done this to black females? You sisters got to get your act together and vote for whoever. It's praised normally for black females, and they are the backbone of the Democratic Party and yum, and that sort of thing. Negro men, I told you they did this last time. Congresswoman Maxine Waters came out. She said it is unforgivable. She didn't say if black people support Trump. She said it was just black males. It's unforgivable if you vote for, like, really? In the system of white supremacy or racism, you don't exactly send out limousines to make sure that all black brothers get to the polling places on election day. Really? Leroy, who can't even get his check cashed at the bank, the fate of the United States presidency is in the hands of Leroy? You all are out of your... Do you think I am out of my mind? That's what it is? Come on. Leroy don't have no control over the electoral college, man. You all can get out of here with all of that black misandry, political rhetoric, FOMO years. Don't turn around and blame it on Leroy. They do this every time, man. I told you in California in 2008, they blamed it. They came around and said that black people are homophobic. That's why Proposition 208, these no-count Negroes are not in support of gay rights, and they did, and that was at the same time that Obama won, too. They love this. They love it. It's like a big joke, a racist joke at that, during election time. Come and act like black people got all this sway, and then particularly focus in on black men. They'll shift it. Sometimes it'll be about the shiftlessness of black males because we don't vote. They'll say Leroy just wants to sit on the couch and play Madden all day, doesn't want to come out here and be civically active. Or Leroy has spent years peddling crack cocaine and got all these felonies, and now he can't participate in the electoral process, and it's on him out there selling poison for that type of thing. Can't win. Mike Jackson, he won't be voting this time either. Shiftless. Can't win. Anyway, Obeezers, I was thinking, man, where are the folks that come out and, you white people been reluctant to support Obeezy? Because I thought that too, like, man, why are you even bringing Obama out to talk to white people? Like, they are not in support of him at all. I'm so glad they had those numbers. Like, wow, the Democrats lost all those seats while he was in office and everything. Like, yes, most white people did not vote for him in 2008 or 2012 when he ran for president. They picked McCain or Mitt Romney. Why would he? They'd come, if you're going to lecture somebody, go lecture white people. See if you can get through that speech without somebody taking a shot at you. And you can get gender specific. Look here, white woman. Now, I've watched you for 2 straight elections. Go out here. You heard what he said. He grabs women in the pee. You heard him. You're going to get your act together, and you are going to, whoa. You put that gun away, ma'am. That's about what I would be expecting. You go out there and lecture these white women about why y'all keep supporting Donald Trump, man. What's wrong with you? Get your act together. You're being patriarchal. I'm going to wait for him to give that speech. Matter of fact, I'll wait for any of them. Get Hillary Clinton to go out and give that speech. FOMO years. Trump. And even, it couldn't even be that the black dudes, if we are reluctant, they got to be, oh, it's because they're misogynistic. It couldn't be. Well, we have watched VP Harris for 4 years. Maybe we're dissatisfied. Nah. Patriarchal, sexist, Negro, heathen male. Yes, got it. Yeah. Any hoodles, I think President Trump has run an amazing campaign, thus he'll be victorious. They said he hasn't run. I don't know if he's run a great campaign. I disagree. You see how he put his fist up when he got shot? Remember that? The first time around, they were going to shoot and he put it, I'm fighting out. They're going to be showing that picture forever. Especially once he went forever. He made the incumbent president tap out. Brilliant. And that's another part, too. Maybe black males looked at all this and said, this looks really slipshod. You put this white dude up here who I was not satisfied with at all. I remember what he said. If you don't vote for me, you're not even black. I guess they couldn't say that this time around. They were like, oh, yeah, the niggers, they didn't like that last time. I don't say that. I remember what he said last time around. You put this lame white dude up. He quits in the middle of the race, and then you go slide her in, and I'm supposed to be cool with all of this, and if I question it, you call me patriarchal? What? 4 more years. Almost got me, OBZ, if I was going to do some name calling, but again, they could have said, look here, OBZers. Got a speech for you. Need to get your black brothers in line. Now, you don't have to do it. You're not in the White House anymore, but it'd be a shame if we had another security lapse. Sasha's getting older. Shame if, security was a step slow. Yes, I'm ignorant enough to think it could happen that way. He did get all those death threats. I'm sure they still need lots of security. So this could be a part of his continuing job to come out and get on his black brothers. Right on. Who is most to blame? Usual suspects. Racist man, racist woman, racist child. Any hoodles, number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Add really quick the segment where they talked about the election and black males getting into an argument. They said the uncle got into it with do not get into any conflict about the election with other non-white people. I talk about this on workplace racism all the time. You can't assume non-white people have the same views about the election or anything like that. Man, no conflict with your attempted family, friends, non-white neighbors, none of that. Housemates, none of that. None of that. About no aspect of it. If they want to, fuss at you or what have you about, you did vote or you didn't vote or whatever. I don't like your candidate or you're a misogynistic black male, whatever. Like, I'm not going back and forth about this. You can say whatever you're going to say, and that's that. I'm not going to listen to this every day either, since I'm not going back and forth with you. We're not going to have, long diatribe about all of this. We'll just get through the election and move forward peaceably. But that there should be no, I got to go and gripe at you because you did vote, you didn't vote, you don't have enough Kamala Harris paraphernalia in your, residence and what have you, not enthusiastic enough about Sister Harris and her campaign. And yes, I understand. Whatever you think need be done, make sure, you carry all that out. And thank you, kind. Hopefully, victims guaranteed qualified. I'm allowed to, do whatever I see fit for the election season, and we can just move forward peacefully, constructively. And if all else fails, minimize contact. We might even have to minimize contact to get through the election season, but really avoid all that. We got to go back and forth and verbally joust over Kamala Harris's policy or your lack of participation or your lack of enthusiasm. None of that. None of that. None of that. Not over the election, because none of this, regardless of what happens, we still have to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. And us jawboning about this election, I would suspect probably with evidence. You don't understand what racism, white supremacy is, how it works. Everything else will only confuse you. That's why we can't have no even really 5-minute argument. But what? Where is your Kamala Harris pen at? What is wrong with you, brother? Mm-hmm. I took all that from Obeezy and didn't call him no names. This is not the time to call Uncle Roger a coon because, he wants to support Kamala Harris. Right on to Uncle Roger. 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let us see. Folks who dialed in, if you have commentary to share, line should be open.
Greetings, everyone.
Heard both of you. I guess get our caller in New York. I heard him first.
Yeah. Thanks, Gus. Greetings, everyone. Callers, listeners. Again, Gus, thanks for the platform. Appreciate your platform. First, I'd like to just kind of make a report in regards to an event I went to. This was an event held in Brooklyn at a Center for Fiction bookstore. And this had the author you had on last week. I believe her name is Aiden Guideline. She was interviewing another author, non-black female, black female, Bria Baker, author of the book Rooted, The American Legacy of Land Theft and Modern Movement for Black Land Ownership. The book was released, I think, it's in June 20 of this year it was released. The event was good. It's always good to see a lot of black faces at a bookstore. Everybody's interested in reading. Although demographic-wise, to give some context, I was like one of 2 black males there. It was probably like 30 or 40 people. Majority were white women, middle-aged white women, and all different, ages of black women there. Did feel a little tricky in that space in that regard. The author spoke about a lot of things and gave information in regards to the fact that we owned more property and had more in the around 1910 as opposed to now where we're losing more property. This is one of the things she mentioned. And one of the things that I appreciated, she spoke about it, the property as a Black woman is that, and I've never really heard anybody speak about land theft and also mention the spiritual context of the land and how they've, ancestor after ancestor, the land was passed on. So losing that obviously has some ramifications on the ancestral, connection that the family has to the land. I did get a chance to ask two questions. One was about gentrification and how does she see that, and she had her perspective on that, which I thought was very good. The second question was a little tricky. I asked her if she thought white people will stop practicing racism. And when I tell you the gasp in that room when I asked that question, you can't even, well, you can imagine. But it was interesting. And she answered the question sort of. She kind of tiptoed around it because I could honestly tell that a lot of her demographic base are middle-aged white women too. So I guess she didn't want to say too much to disparagingly. Again, VGQ, that's her prerogative. That's how she moves. But it's interesting that she's stating that from 1910 to present day that we're losing more and more land, but her answer was basically stating that white people are getting better in doing things. I don't know how that matches up with even her own work. So that's kind of where I was just caught. But again, appreciated her work and it was really, and I purchased her book and I was really glad to hear somebody speak about that, as well as the fact that even on those properties, on the deeds, women were not included on the deed as well. It was just the Black man's name and his wife. So that I also thought was interesting. There was a little bit of passive aggressiveness here and there about patriarchy and said to me afterwards when I was having conversations with non-white female and a white woman, and it was just kind of like, it was annoying, but I didn't want to get into definitions and ask anything about what they think about patriarchy. I was just there to get more information from the author, as well as talk to more of the white women and see why the heck they were there. So that was that, but it was actually overall a good event. The next thing was going into the segments, the food dye segment, excellent. I just had a cousin. She has a 6-year-old son. He's being diagnosed right now for ADHD. But when I spoke to her, I told her the two things you have to look at before you even really, take the diagnosis to heart is first, get him off of the devices, the iPad, the phone. And I've seen him before he was even 6 or even 5 on an iPad, on a cell phone, playing video games and doing all types of things. And I was like, that's not healthy. I immediately knew. And then the second thing is, it's just recently, and I mean recently within like the last month and a half, that they started changing his diet. Prior to that, he was used to eating junk. And I told her, I said, this is critical. Along with sleep, you're going to have to weed him off of the sugar. And I mean, let's be honest, this time of the year is a consumption time from here, like literally all the way till Valentine's Day. And this is for everybody. We just consume and consume and consume until we just, like by Valentine's Day, they're like, okay, that's enough. So it's going to be a little bit difficult for her to do this, but I think those two things have to take place. Sorry, 3 things. The cutting off the devices, limiting them as much as possible, changing his diet. And the next thing would be obviously making sure he gets enough sleep, because he does stay up too long. So that segment on food dyes, I'm going to share with her. Hopefully that will help her out. Reading, really important segment, obviously, for multiple reasons. I have my son reading now because they don't give him books so far in college that I've seen that are constructive. So I gave him Malcolm X. I have him reading that. And I'm going to have him read Carter G. Woodson's Miseducation of the Negro as well. There's just so much work that they need to get caught up on and read, just for multiple reasons. And mental health, I mean, there's so many reasons to read. It's ridiculous. Empathy helps you develop so many skill sets, and also gives children a glance into adult life as well. And Japan, you mentioned Japan. Japan is one of the few so-called first world countries that's not obese. And I think you gave some good reasons why. Whenever they do leave, though, and leave Japan, they do end up gaining weight to some degree. But some of the reasons you mentioned are exactly the reason why they still maintain that, as well as banning junk that we obviously accept here in the other so-called westernized first world countries. And on a good note, I got a chance to take the family out to an apple picking to a farm, just to get them outside of the city, let them see a little bit more countryside, breathe some fresh air, see some mountains, some trees, and kind of get an idea that there's something different out there than just living in the city or just some boring suburbs, you know. But that is all I have to report for now. On that note, I will mute my line. Thank you.
Really quick, with the book talk that you went to, Miss Godine, with us just a few days back, when you say was some passive aggressiveness around, I guess that hey, we got one of these old patriarchal males that doesn't want to support Sister Harris. What specifically did someone accuse you of being patriarchal, or what did you observe that was so-called passive aggressive?
In the midst of a conversation I was having with a white female and a non-white female, the black one, we were talking about having after my question was the last question. Like when I asked the question, will white people stop practicing racism? The room gasped and she answered, and then Ms. Godine said, okay, that'll be all the questions for now. So after that, people started socializing, and these two women were speaking with me, you know, respectively about my question. And then the black woman said, oh, yeah, you know, we need to deal with that patriarchy. And, oh, no, not the patriarchy. And she looked away and rolled her eyes. And I was just like, what are we doing? Like, if you want to have a conversation, we could have a conversation about patriarchy. But it just seemed a little tacky, and I let it go because, again, I'm not there for that kind of engagement. And I'm trying to, again, right, minimize conflict. No need for it. So that's what occurred.
Minimize conflict. I can't stress that. Mr. Fuller stresses that. Mr. Fuller stresses that. Minimize. I even pointed that out because I had we had a difference of opinion, which is fine because I wasn't even talking to this person, but we had a difference of opinion where they wanted to focus on maximizing constructive activity with non-white people. I have no problem with that, but I have observed where non-white people, we don't have agreement about what is constructive. Sometimes even that can spark conflict amongst victims of racism. I emphasize minimize conflict. And even Mr. Fuller, the very first time he was a guest on the Cows, way back in 2009, he said, when we go to seek out other non-white people, we are looking for conflict. He said, we don't realize that. It's not a conscious, willful thing, but that's what it is. We're not looking to learn anything. We are looking for conflict. And man, that is true more often than I would like it to be. Even with reading Mr. Fuller and all that does not seem to mitigate it at all. Like, man, just seeking out non-white nations. Are white people going to stop practicing racism? You know, Leroy, we're going to have to deal with that patriarchy. Even if Kamala Harris does lose it, it's my fault for being shiftless and lame. That was not my question at all. Like, man, victims guaranteed qualified. Thank you. Have a blessed day. Have a blessed day. She didn't come over to say, we're going to have to deal with these white people. No. We're going to have to deal with Leroy. Woo! Black male privilege. Once again, I do not think it's possible to listen to the cows and not know about books, new literature to check out. We talk about books all the time. We just had Miss Godine as a guest on the program. We talked about her book, which was just published last year, 23. And then Rooted, that was just published this year. Caller in New York, let us know about that event. When Miss Godine was on the program, I said, oh man, she's going to be here. I'm going to go check that out. And I said, oh wow, they got another author with a book here. Rooted. Look at that. And even when he was talking about that, N.D.B. Connolly, victim of white supremacy, was a guest on the cows in 2015. He said, white people, he wrote the book A World More Concrete. He said white people have got increasingly better at taking property from black people. Talked about Tulsa, Oklahoma and all of that. They used to go through and you kill all the niggers and purge the town and do all that. You don't do it that way anymore. That's sloppy and costly. When you say Godfather, 50 years from the Godfather sequel, 1974. Say we get respectable. We move to Vegas, get a casino. We're respectable now. We're not shooting people out in the streets. We don't do it that way now. Now we raise property taxes. Drug and or lead pipes in the area and you move voluntarily. We wait till all the niggers move and then we clean the pipes up. And your son, Freddie Gray, talked about that too in A Terrible Thing to Waste. Harriet A. Washington, and she connected it to Freddie Gray with the lead pipes specifically and the food coloring. Top 10, man. Harriet A. Washington. Brilliant. And they went apple picking. It was lots of goodies. I can't say with the book club that, the book club, yes, for sure. Catherine Massey every Thursday. But he went to the event book reading, was able to ask questions and shut the event down. Are white people going to stop practicing? That's it. No more questions. They were to talk about you. Did you hear that uppity Negro came here and messed up our event? Lord, who even let him in here? It was not for him. Which it wasn't. If you get an opportunity, go ask questions. If you can take your offspring, let them see you ask questions publicly, seriously about racism that is sorely lacking and needs to be modeled, particularly seeing a white person being asked serious questions about racism. And even that diversion, I have observed that as well. Non-white people frequently will interfere. You don't come in here asking this good white woman, are we going to, matter of fact, when we going to deal with your sexism, Leroy? That's what it could be a black male come and ask the exact same question. Or we got to deal with Mayor Adams. We in New York. What about your scandalous cousin, the mayor? Wait a minute. What? I thought we... God bless you, Mayor Adams. You fight the good fight, brother. Let's see. I guess we retired firefighter.
Yes, sir. Greetings, everyone. My first report would be on, as a response, I guess, to you were talking about the C.O.W.S program, your program, and it is a means for people to be able to tune into some of the archives. In my opinion, the C.O.W.S, the context of white supremacy, has the most profound history of knowledge and understanding of not only racism, white supremacy, but a lot of other things like health, mental as well as physical health. And it's cataloged, and I even use it. I even use it when I make the choice of working out in the place that I'm allowed to stay in, to turn on the cows up loud enough, and that would motivate me through my workout. And with the program being at least 3 hours long, it certainly would surpass my workout time. You know, you're talking about what, 15 years, something like that, of background history that you can reach out on either your computer or your television. I actually use YouTube to get the C.O.W.S programs. And so I can turn it up loud enough to how loud I want to hear it. Also the C.O.W.S is very much regulated to reduce argument, profanity to the point to whereas it's name calling. So that is another thing that makes it very important, very, very important to do so. As you state, sometimes it may not solve the problem of racism, white supremacy, but I would say it possibly could, and at the same time, it actually is something that's constructive, in my opinion. The Obama appearance, I actually, since I heard about it several times, I actually watched it. And what I paid attention to was who he was talking to in that clip. And, you know, the topic was black males, but I saw a couple of white women in there. Some black females was in there. White males were in there. There was a black male child who is not wouldn't be old enough to be a voter. So I'm thinking that the whole appearance was staged, and there was no point of questions and answers or anything like that. He just said some things for about 5 minutes, and I guess moved on. You know, from there, the Secret Service, of course, somewhere around, you know, from that standpoint. But I know a lot of places where he wouldn't, and I'm not making it a threat or anything like that, but there's a lot of places that I know he wouldn't dare show up, not with that intent in mind. And I'm not necessarily saying from the standpoint that he would be attacked or anything like that in a negative way. He would definitely would have some questions asked upon him, some deep and intrinsic questions to, if that's his subject that he's going to bring to non-white males who are racially classified as black. Travel can be educational, and I'm going to within a few days take a couple of trips, one to Washington, D.C., to go to as many of the museums as I possibly can during the time that I'm there, you know, and study, and also to Oklahoma, former concentration camp, where I went to undergrad studies in college at Langston University. From my understanding, the state of Oklahoma owes Langston University $400 million, which is not surprising. I'm pretty sure most of the HBCUs have the same thing in common. Last but not least, I have so far avoided any arguments about this election with anybody, actually. And because I actually have that in my mind that I'm not going to do that. If I do get into a discussion about it with someone who I am not sure of their understanding / opinion, I would stay in the question lane. And that's it. And thanks everybody for listening.
Question lane, love it. Hard to generate conflict and fighting, just getting clarification about someone said or what their intent is and all that good stuff. Love it. Safe travels to D.C., Oklahoma, Neely Fuller Jr.'s native land. Said he's going to check out the museums and all that good stuff. Maybe go to the African American Museum of History at the Smithsonian and check all that good stuff out. And they have so much to view that. Man, you can go look at they should put a museum up for January 6th. Go take some pictures where all the terrorist hooliganism took place. But yes, bravo. Safe travels. D.C. and Oklahoma. Get out on the roads and enjoy the foliage this time of year. Yes. Make sure, give out the number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. That is important as well. Retired firefighter, when he said the racial theater, we might even call it, President Obama, because they said in the news clip that I played that President Obama, he knew that there were going to be cameras, so that, it's Obama. This is going to be seen certainly around the country, if not around the world. And so he has an opportunity to very carefully pick his words. As retired firefighter said, if he had been in other venues, there might have at least been a smattering of booze, WTH, what, just a little bit of call and response, if you will, to let him know we do not agree with that statement. But yes, these events are generally staged. He said there was no Q&A. We're not going to have old caller in New York get up here and, what did you mean? Security risk. This Q&A is over. Let's see. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I said ahead, food is important. I was talking about Japan and their lack of obesity problem. Every meal is important. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was all foodie. Food is so important and an integral part of counter-racism. I intend to make banana bread, which I've never made before, which is shocking because I've made so many wacky things, and banana bread is not very difficult, at all. But I'm going to make banana bread. You need really ripe bananas. So I've had my bananas chilling, getting brown for a minute, like a week. Because they said if you really want to do it up, you want them to be like 50% brown. Like let them get really, really ripe. Sweeter they will be, the better the banana bread will be. So they've been chilling. Now, I have been told, I've never made banana bread before, so I've been told you can go to the grocery store and ask, do you have overripe bananas? Because they'll get if they start to get to that point, they will generally remove them toss them, maybe they donate them, maybe they just throw them in the trash, whatever. Lots of food waste. Probably throw them in the trash. But they'll take them away. If they're really, really starting to brown up and everything, they'll take them out. So they'll just have the really green ones or the really yellow ones. And so I asked, do you have any really ripe bananas at the grocery store, intending to purchase, 2 or 3 extra ones? And they said, man, we just got a new stock in because we really didn't have any bananas yesterday. And, most of them, they're kind of yellowish, palish. So he starts looking through. He's like, yeah, the few, these are kind of old. This is as close as we got that are starting to brown a little bit. But even those, they were not, you still need, for where they should be, you still want to wait like a day or 2, maybe even 3, before they get really ripe and great for the banana bread. But he packed up like 3 pounds and just gave them to me. I was stunned. Organic. These are like the bananas that I'm kind of picky about my bananas because I use them for smoothies and, all that. And I like to get these are the really good bananas, organic. They don't even have these at Whole Foods. But he gave me like 3 or 4 pounds of that. Now, they are bananas. Bananas are like $1 a pound, so it's like $4. So, I mean, I'm not exactly doing the watermelon dance, but I did not know if you just go and say, I'm making banana bread. Do you have overripe bananas? They will give you free bananas. Right on. Even if I reneged on the banana bread, I always make smoothies. Like, I would just freeze them and right on. And I can make vegan ice cream because you need a lot of bananas for that too. So, man, easy one. Just tell them you're going to make banana bread at the grocery store and maybe they'll hook you up with some bananas. Lots of them, maybe. Let's see. Other folks dialed in commentary to share. Lauren, I'll look for other hands as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you for allowing me to speak. The first section I wanted to talk about was when he was talking about the college students arriving at the college and they hadn't read any of the classics. Well, that's what he said at the beginning. And he said he used to read 3 novels in 1 week. Well, I think that's how he said it. And now many students struggle to complete 1 novel in 3 weeks. Man, I think 3 books in 1 week that's a lot. Unless they're, really short or really interesting. Let me see. Also, he said, if you haven't got readers, what are writers going to do? Yeah, I thought about that. He talked about, he said it would be problematic for society, businesses, individuals. I guess the business part, publishers and bookstores. And I guess they could make audiobooks, but people don't seem to be that interested in those either. Let's see. The prisoners in Florida, the inmates that weren't evacuated, well, some were evacuated across the street, if that counts. But there were many parts of that segment that were notable. But the inmates being forced to keep their waste in plastic bags after Helene, that was especially terrible. I'm not sure how long they had to do that. They talked about the decline in licensed foster homes, and what sounded like a white woman, I don't know. But I think she was a nurse, and I am not sure. I think that lady said she'd fostered 7 children. If that's not what she said, please let me know. But I think this was in Sandusky, Ohio. That part made me think of Jerry Sandusky. They're probably not related. But just her fostering 7 children, if that's what she said, that made me think of Jennifer and Sarah Hart. The black males talking about therapy, mental issues. And he said we might not have access to health care, but we know where the liquor store is. Yeah, that's lots of people, not just black people, try to make themselves feel better with alcohol and marijuana. But I think, yeah, that's definitely an issue. And and he also said black males were more likely to be medicated, just like here, take this medicine for the rest of your life instead of getting therapy and trying to get to the root of the problem. I'm paraphrasing, but Dr. Welsing discussed that. She said when she was in medical school, the white doctors they took that approach. Let's just put them on medication and not give them therapy. She was older, so I'm trying to think, how many years ago was that? 40 years? 50 years? I don't know, but not a lot has changed. And, he said the first therapist he got was a white woman and it didn't work out. And then I think it was another black male. He said certain things he doesn't feel comfortable talking about. And I didn't know, does he mean he doesn't feel comfortable talking about racism? And I wondered if that's what happened with the white lady. He went in there, talked about some issues that he had and she was dismissive or, she minimized it or whatever because she's a white person and that's what white people do when you talk about racism. The Department of Justice charged an Afghan national with a plan to commit a violent attack, I guess, in the name of ISIS. And the question was asked, was this a lone wolf operation? Usually white people are the only ones who are called lone wolves. They said he communicated on Telegram with other people. I mean, communicating on a platform designed for communication, that's not, I don't know. But I'm not sure that he answered the question, but he did say that. And he said that at the federal and state level, they were on guard against certain threats. And they said they'd never seen this many red lights flashing. But another thing I noticed, they said that the people who were supposed to buy the house and the people selling the guns, I think they said they were government agents, or they basically worked for the people who put the charges on them. So, that made me wonder if that was entrapment. And the segment right after that, where they were talking about the election-related violence being more likely in local communities, they also used that, it wasn't the exact same metaphor. They said all of them see the lights flashing red. But let me see. I wondered, who's going to do the election violence? Was it going to be a lot of people from Afghanistan, or was it going to be a lot of white people? I don't know what the certain kind of people that they were looking for. I think that's all I have. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Do you have fresh turmeric?
I do not.
Do you use fresh turmeric in your cooking ever?
No. I mean, I've had things, I've bought turmeric things, but I don't buy turmeric.
Superfood, man. Superfood. Beets, too. Oh, beets. They have golden beets. That's another one where you could do the color match. You could get the golden beets and then get the turmeric because it's kind of golden, bright orangey carrots. Like you could pair and have food that all matches that same color. You even have the lobster mushrooms because they're the same color. Like you'd have all that matched. And yeah. Anyway, that's goofy. I would have my brain computer, or you could match foods sometime and do it by colors because those colors are correspondent with certain nutrients in the foods. I think like the orange, I'm trying to think like the orange for the pumpkins and the orange for the yellow watermelon. I think that's beta carotene. Have to go by. I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian, but I think that's what that is called in terms of why that color is. But that is a nutrient that is really important for your health and well-being. But you could go around and match foods that way just by, what produce do they have for this season? And we'll do the butternut squash. That's super seasonal, right? With the apples, go out do your apple picking. They have all the pumpkins and stuff. Same thing, pumpkin squash. They have all that stuff out there in great abundance. They have lots of that on sale. In fact, if you have recipes for squash, that is a way better memory to have with your offspring, that we made roasted butternut squash together with Attempted Mom. That was so yummy, and that's what I think of when it's cold, as opposed to, man, we ate 30 Snicker bars and then had 2 cavities next time we went to the dentist, and diabetes. Every meal is important. Absolutely. Does anybody just, if they said, what meal is important? Have you heard that? What would your answer be? Like, what meals are important? Would you have an answer to that? Because other than like Christmas, Thanksgiving, that's one. Sorry, it would have been Thanksgiving, maybe Christmas. Meal is important. What would your answer be? Like an important meal? Do you know what's an important meal or the most important meal? Anyone?
I don't think people think that in this part of the world, that every meal is important. They think maybe eating is important, but not about every meal.
Any? Is it A-N-Y? How about any meal that you can, like a singular one that, like, oh yeah, this one, at least this one time a year, this meal is important. Is it even one of those or not really?
I mean, Thanksgiving.
That was the first one I thought of.
I think most important one is probably Thanksgiving, but I just think that's just because family's around. That's the main thing. I don't think anything special about the food per se. I kind of grew out of I'm still growing out of the addictive phase of the food, like, because that food it's tough. You know, if you're having the regular so-called soulful meal, you know, with all the fried foods and the candied yams and the sugar and all that, so it's tough.
That A word he just said, addictive. Yes, it is. That's embarrassing too, right? Because that's the only meal that I can think of that's important. That's like the worst food. Like, that's not, we're gonna get kale and Brussels sprouts and bok choy. Like, it's the exact, we're going to get these chitlins. It's the worst food, the worst, and heaps of it. We're not just going to get like reasonable pork, like heaps and heaps and heaps of it. That is how pitiful everything is. Like, wow, everything is super duper backwards. Just, man. Anyway, I will say all of those addictive Thanksgiving foods that everyone is getting ready to chow, or many of us are getting ready to chow down on in a few weeks. Maybe not the chitlins. Maybe not the chitlins. Beyond that, and maybe not the country ham. Beyond that, all of that stuff can be made vegan. Like the yams, that's just yams. I have that on my social medias where I made yam. Oh, that was the inspiration for me making sweet potato pecan pie, like together. The bottom was pecan and the top was sweet potato. The inspiration for knowing that would be amazing, and it was. I made yams vegan for Thanksgiving. They even had vegan marshmallows on top. They had pecans, yum. But I mean, you can make all of that stuff. And just make stuffing. You can do that. Gravy, mashed potatoes, macaroni and cheese. Other than the chitlins, country ham, everything else, the greens, all that other stuff, you could make that vegan easily. Biscuits, cornbread, whatever else, you can make all that. They have vegan butter. Like, you can make all that stuff easily. Like, you could pretty much I'd said that would be one thing, like, as opposed to us getting together and, you know, I'm going to go upside your head about the election. Man, let's get together and eat a little bit better. Like, okay, we can have all that stuff. Let's see if we can make it a little bit better so that we don't die from diabetes and have to get arms and fingers amputated and all the rest of it. We can be a little healthier. We see to the man, you done lost about 10 pounds. Uncle, wow, you looking good. That like right on. We can eat yummy, have some smoothies and all the rest. That pumpkin pie smoothie, what did I just say? But yeah, you could have all that stuff, the traditional, just change up a few things and reduce the sugar. Man, they put sugar in everything and gobs of it. Just, that's an easy one. If a recipe calls for a cup of sugar, you could probably easily make it a half cup of sugar, or at least 2/3. You wouldn't even, no one would notice, even from desserts. Like I've done that with cobblers and desserts that I gave to meat eaters and folks who consume dairy and white sugar all day long, where I significantly reduced the amount of sugar in the recipe. No one noticed the peep because everything is over sugar. So just small things that you can do for your health, especially if you have children. Oof. No, we cannot do no Halloween, and particularly because children, they are so, what they say, the people that are the most vulnerable are the most susceptible to all those poisons and such. Most of that Halloween candy and such, it's like, I mean, you want to talk about artificial, man, they did all that need to be connected. Like, man, no, you do not need to eat no 15, 20 of all that nonsense just because it's a so-called special Halloween holiday. Like, no. They have, they have candy, Halloween candy that has no white sugar, no food coloring and all of that. You can go, like, if you go to some of the ritzy white grocery stores, Trader Joe's, they will have that candy. I've seen it where you can go, it's even vegan, doesn't have any dairy products or anything like that, egg. You can go and get that. That is way better. If you've got to participate in all of this, you can make candy, cookies, same thing, brownies, they do all that goofiness for Halloween. You can make those treats yourself and make it a project. That way it will be the memory of us making these tasty treats together, as opposed to we ate 50 Snickers bars together and then got all these cavities. Every meal is, and really everything you put in your mouth is super important. Everything, and so much of the food is addictive. I can't say it. He just said, man, it is addictive. It's addictive for so many reasons. It's got addictive poisons in the food, and then those memories. Oh, we were eating those chitlins. Me and Uncle Leroy. Good old times. All that gets encoded. And so you want to reach back. I miss old Uncle Willie. He's not with us because he died at 50 from diabetes. But I miss old Uncle Willie. So, yes, let's go and get some of the chitlins. And he loved a little bit of pie. And for Uncle Willie would, more than anything, he'd like to still be here, healthy. Every meal is important. Get some fresh turmeric. You can just slip a little bit, and it's powerful. It's on the superfood list. You can just put a little bit in your smoothie. You can cook, I said, my rice, you can cook with it. Lots of things, stir fry, but fresh, and it's expensive. That's another one. Like, this is intended for white people. You don't have to get a lot, but man, it is so potent on the superfood list. Beets are not expensive. They are also so healthful for you. You can slip them in your smoothie. Lots of different ways that you can. I think they do that for Thanksgiving. You can probably slip them in stuffing. I bet they have recipes where you can slip some beets in the stuffing. Any hoodles. We will be here. Check the social media and such for upcoming programs this week, adding to the archives as we move into autumn 2024. Keep your children away from football. See, they have all that bad food with football, too, because it's pizza and chicken wings, potato chips and Cheetos and all that. See, lots of reasons. Keep your child. Everything when he said child's having problems, bad food, got all these electronic devices. Some of that stuff is system working together. You're on YouTube, they talked about that. They got all those advertisements and such aimed at children for Chips Ahoy and Lunchables and hot dogs, ultra-processed foods, they call it. Pizza Hut and then all the rest of it, McDonald's and Pizza Huts and blah, 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 blah. Man, no TV. Resist the phone as long as possible. Get your diet straight. If you are addicted to Chips Ahoy and Snickers, Krispy Kreme, you are waiting to gorge on Snicker bars like old Tutty Gus T used to. Man, get it together for your offspring. That's in some of the books that we've read. Countdown. talked about that directly. Get your diet together before you even try to have children, because that has an impact on your offspring. Yep. You are what your grandparents ate. Yep. We will be back shortly. Sobriety, man, that's another one, because see, the candy, because it's all sugar, rum, and everything, that just sets you up for the alcohol. Sobriety would be best, because they got a lot of sugary drinks too, mudslide and all the rest of it. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. Things are already dangerous, just gets worse, having lots of people out on the road intoxicated. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy, even if they're not going to vote, or if they're going to vote, in quotes, incorrectly. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person, even if they are voting incorrectly. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name calling, no gossiping, no throwaway offspring, no name calling OBZ. Try some fresh organic turmeric, fresh beets as well. You could put both in your smoothie. You would never even know it. Cows signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. No problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.